Hello and welcome to the B&B Show. My name here is Brandon, and this guy right over here, that's Brendan. We run this show twice a week, all time, every day, all day, except for really the depths of the off season. But we are now hot and heavy into the middle of the year. Brendan, thank you for coming on back here to the Hawks Nest. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me back on. Always a pleasure to be here.
Well, I wish I could have you under better circumstances and that we get to cover something that was a little bit more fun. But unfortunately, we're not going to have the opportunity to do that today, as me and Brendan are going to have to kind of do a little bit of an autopsy here over what just occurred this past Sunday against the Rams. Before we do that, let's give you guys, though, a little bit of updates on maybe some moves that have been going on with the Seattle Seahawks, because, of course, we've got some injury concerns and some other moves that have need to be made because of those injury concerns. So I'll let Brendan here kind of update you guys on that, where we currently stand.
So basically, in terms of like concrete news, there's really only one thing at the moment. The Seahawks have signed Jason Peters after having him in for a visit earlier today. It was talked about yesterday. He is on the practice squad. That is of note, not yet on the active roster. And I don't think it can be expected that he get to the active roster for a little while here because he's not in game shape. He wasn't sure he was going to be playing football this year. I seriously doubt he was keeping himself in the shape that he needs to be in to perform, because you have to understand Jason Peters is 41 years old. Mm-hmm. If he plays, I assume that he will play at least a little bit at some point this year. He will be the oldest offensive tackle in the league and one of the older offensive tackles in NFL history. But we are talking about a very good player. He's a 9-time Pro Bowler, probably making the Hall of Fame. I certainly think he should anyway.
Yeah.
So that is something we may have to wait on. I like it. I like the signing, but I don't like what it says about the health of our current starting offensive tackles. So you're trying to make the glass half full here, but really you can probably only get it to about 30%. It's not even half full, I don't think. There's no way you can make half full out of Charles Cross or Abe Lucas missing significant time.
There isn't. There is as important to what makes our offense go, especially in light of what's behind them, as anything else. And I've got to say that there's some slight concerns starting to grow inside of me here a little bit for Abraham Lucas's knee, because last year, of course, he got shut down because of the knee. I've heard Carroll reference there being maybe something there a little bit within it long term that they've been having to kind of manage. And it does give me a little concerned with him. And when you start talking about patella, which is what Carroll was speaking on with Lucas and that injury, that gets you really nervous. It sounds like he's passing all the tests and whatnot on that, but it's certainly smart of the team to find a hedge here, Brendan. Even an old one like Jason Peters. And let's also acknowledge there wasn't a great option out there. As people have talked to us, I'm sure you hear it on your chat too, of we got to go get a backup. We got to get somebody that, like, yeah. Those guys are held in high value, even the backup ones. There's nobody out on the street to go and get at this point. So you have to make do with what you got. Jason Peters is what you got. And he should be able to come in. Hopefully, I would think that if you're going to see Curhan, let's say, because I think they would kick him depending on where they need him. I think that he would come in at least look more functional or as functional as the guys you currently have minimum. But more likely than not, at least a little bit, maybe a titch above that. But you're right. Yeah. This is going to be one for a couple of weeks. You got to give him the game shape. And Lord knows, Brendan, like if you've been playing for what have you been playing 15 years, and then somebody tells you get to retire, that first year you're on the buffet circuit. You know what I'm saying? You're just every day is like I can finally just do whatever I want and I'm laying about, just resting your body. So I can only imagine the shape he's probably in.
Yeah. Ask the Jets about that. They're making the calls. They're making the calls to all the recently retired quarterbacks and finding out they all got beer bellies. So
they do.
They know. Yeah. So that's how it works. Last year, by the way, Jason Peters was signed under similar circumstances with the Cowboys. He was signed on September 5th and did not play until the 26th, I think. So it took 3 weeks. So I would expect something similar here, which is not great because we kind of need him now. We may not even need him in 3 weeks for all we know. But I guess it's the best you can do in this circumstance.
I guess it is. I mean, there's just not another alternative option, I think, and it just sucks losing both your two tackles like you did. It's a crappy kind of thing, especially first game of the year, and we'll see how the team can manage it. The turf toe in particular, especially when you go over to cross, that thing's something that I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to have to be dealing with that now all year long, where it just doesn't get better, and it's just something he's going to have to be out there limping through, which isn't going to help against Nick Bosa. That's not going to playing him twice a year is not going to make that favorable to him. What else do we have going on here?
Not really a whole lot else in terms of news. Pete Carroll did say today that Witherspoon is expected to play this week. So I guess we got some good news there.
Woohoo.
Doesn't seem like Lockett had a real concussion coming out of that game. He went back in the game after the hit, so that's expected. But yeah, it looks like Lockett's going to be fine. And there really wasn't a ton else coming out of that game. We got some of the more kind of fluff type things, like the more frivolous things, like Carroll's talked about, I had a serious talk with Metcalf about these penalties, but that's not really concrete, actionable stuff. That's just people talking, and we'll see if it ends up meaning something down the line.
Yeah, I guess we should let's get it out now because it's really a subject that I kind of was not even rankled by. Just I honestly don't care, and I know there's a contingent of the Seahawks fandom that I got to say in doing this show as often as I do and having the interactions as much as I do on the live streams, Brendan. I don't know if you have the same feeling from your end, but there is a contingent. It's not the majority. It's not half. It's just there is a contingent that just, in my opinion, has been kind of out on that guy for a while, and there's not a whole lot he can do to earn their trust back. And when he has moments like this, it becomes confirmation bias and like, see, he's horrible, he's awful. We've got to, and even start to mention things like trade, silly things like trade and whatnot to me, which I was pondering last night, just going, this is so silly that we're at a place with this kind of player saying that. But where do you stand with it?
I mean, I don't care for it. I don't like it. I wish it wasn't happening, but I also recognize that if we're talking about this game, if we want to talk about this game, I think that if we're trying to figure out why we lost that game, we'd have to spend about 10 hours sitting here talking about that game before we started talking about something like Metcalf, because it had nothing to do, what Metcalf did had nothing to do with that game. Let's be clear about that. Now, I'd prefer, especially because the NFL seems like they now have it out for him a little bit. They're looking for it. Like we saw that last year. Like he did some very trivial thing against Tampa. You remember that play?
Yes.
In the Tampa Bay game? Like he didn't even do anything and they threw the flag on him. They're looking for it now. This is what they did with Randy Moss eventually. I remember when Randy Moss was in Oakland, he got flags thrown on him for doing nothing because he was Randy Moss. And everyone was like, yeah, that guy's going to do stuff. So be ready. You got to have your finger on the trigger here. So yeah, I do wish it would stop, but I recognize that there are much bigger problems going on here right now. And I want to focus on that. I hope that the lesson sinks in a little bit. I do hope that whatever Carroll said to him does affect the way he looks at things a little bit, and he can pull it back just a little bit. But I'm not looking for him to pull it all the way back. He's never going to be a team captain. He's never going to be one of these, leaders. He's never going to be what Lockett has become. I don't think he'll ever be anything like that. But you got to have a couple of guys like that, or at the very least, I think you can survive with guys like that. So no, I'm not tripping on it. So that's really what I had to say about it. I don't like it. I really don't like the fact that, by the way, apparently Witherspoon got hurt on that play. I don't Akello Witherspoon, by the way, to be clear, of course. I mean, that's not good. That's not cool. That's not okay. But I'm also trying to keep it in perspective a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the teams being able to provoke DK and him not being aware of the fact that officials are going to be looking at him first and foremost and holding him to a different standard than other players. I mean, there was a play in this game where one of the Rams players was over the top of DK Metcalf after an incomplete pass and completely taunting him, and there was no flag. And he's right over the top of DK doing it. And what did cause the flag was not the hit. It was DK responding to the Rams sideline. Based on what I saw with the hit on it, and I know that people get, again, up in arms with this type of thing, but I come back to, Brennan, this is football at the end of the day. They're not out there playing patty cake. And as a player, it's your responsibility, if it's a live play, to have your head on a swivel and be looking around yourself. And the official didn't call a flag on that hit, if I'm not mistaken. So, I do truly believe this is a man's game, and you've got to enforce your will upon another man. And you don't do that by giving him hugs. You've got to go out there and kind of sometimes be brutal. And was DK frustrated at that point and maybe lashing out on top of that a little bit? Yeah, maybe, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it suddenly makes the play like we got the up in arms nature of some folks to act like this isn't football. It's like, I feel like are you watching soccer? Is that what we're trying to watch? Because I came in the 80s and 90s and like they've legislated a lot of the physicality and stuff out of it. Now we're going to start legislating stuff that's actually within the legal confines. The rules okay, but we just don't like it because the guy got hurt on the play. I can't go with that myself. I'll probably be in disagreement with many on this one, but that's just, like you said, that's my thoughts on it. This is football. That's what I love about this, is the physicality. I don't like blind shots. I wish, he could keep certain things more in control, but it's not, to me, a big issue. All right. So there is one other extra thing I'm going to talk about, but let's talk about that after we kind of get into this game, because I think we got to talk about this game. We got to get into this, Brendan. And there's one particular place, we've got to start out here is on the defense. But before we get there, I want to first understand where was your thoughts coming out of this game? Like, as a mindset, as a feeling, I mean, because and let me set this up a little bit. There's, of course, contingent right now, as we have in our Hawk fandom, of those folks who come out of this saying, well, there was no preseason and and we just got to, and then the other ones who are full on freak out mode. We have kind of two ends of the spectrum going on right now.
I mean, I came out of that game. I think my main thought was I didn't know we could play that bad. I had no idea this team had it in their capacity to play that bad. And I do think it's something that kind of ruins your trust, because you're like, I saw that once. When am I going to see it again? I could see it again at any time. The fact that they showed they are capable of playing that badly in a game. And this is not a game after a 10-game winning streak. If we were late in the season going into week 16 and we just won 10 games in a row and everything was great, and then we lost a game we had no business losing, that would be like, okay, we were feeling ourselves. That's not the case here. Mm-hmm. Last time the Seahawks played a meaningful football game, they got blown off the field. It was in San Fran. They got destroyed. And because of that, I think you have to cast this game in a completely different light. Like, to me, and don't get me wrong, I know there were other teams in week one that got embarrassed. There were plenty of other teams that got embarrassed in week one, but I would argue that no team got embarrassed more than we did. I would argue it's obviously not making national news the way that some teams getting embarrassed is. Joe Burrow signs that big contract and then goes out there and does nothing. That's making headlines in a way that we're not. The Giants did that on national TV. They're making headlines, but I just look at this team and I look at the guys who just dominated that game. Look at the guys who dominated for the Rams. And I wondered, like, is this the most embarrassed I've ever been after a Seahawks game ever since 1996? I was trying to find another game. I was thinking, like, okay, 42-7 against the Rams 6 years ago. Now, that was a good Rams team. That was a really good Rams team. That Rams team won the division, made the playoffs. And we had a lot of injuries in that game. We were missing a lot of key components. We had no real chance in that game. I was thinking about games like
how about the Browns on the road?
Browns. Well, at least the defense played good in that game, right? Like, at least there was something to be happy about. Like, there were games in the 90s that I remember that were obviously bad, but we were a bad team back then. There were no expectations. We had Dennis Erickson as our coach, Rick Myers, the quarterback, washed up Warren Moon as our quarterback. I think Jeff George might have been our quarterback at one point. I don't even remember.
We had a few more games in there too. A few of those more games that year, like the Indy game that year. There was a couple ones that were just look away.
Yeah, but those teams were bad. I get it. Like, you didn't really have a quarterback. You didn't really have an offensive line. You didn't have guys on defense. You were blowing it up after the Alexander era. I understand that. But this, like, how is this what I'm watching? And I think the really disturbing thing is for our defense, because that's the side of the ball I think really needs to be focused on. I'm definitely dying on that hill of the defense needs to be the thing that we're talking about first and foremost.
Amen.
It's kind of the same game that we've been watching several times a year for the last 5-6 years, right? It's wide receivers running wide open over the middle, beating our zone, no defender in sight. It's no real pass rush at all. It's the same game that we watch several times a year. The only reason why we didn't see it very much last year was because our run defense was bad enough to where teams didn't even need to do that. But it goes all the way back to 460 yards against Matt Schaub, 40 yards against washed up Andy Dalton, 350 yards to Jameis Winston, who couldn't even see, like, he was legally blind. And he still threw for 350 on us. The Cam Newton game, he threw for 400 yards. He threw for like 150 in every other game that year. And it's the same stuff. So I think that's where the pain comes in. This isn't just one game. A lot of people in the postgame stream, in the comments, say it's just one game. It's not one game. This is the same game we've been watching for years. That's the thing. And it has to destroy your faith a little bit to see this game again, because we weren't supposed to be seeing this stuff anymore. Like, this stuff was supposed to be like, okay, we're getting rid of the old defense that created that stuff. We're bringing in new players. We're spending high draft picks on really good defensive pieces. We're doing this. We're doing that. We're spending big money on a guy like a Nwosu, like a Dre'Mont Jones. We're bringing in a Julian Love. So we don't have this happen anymore. To see it happen against this Rams team that maybe we're wrong, maybe we completely missed the boat here, I think is probably going to be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes before this season's over. It destroys your confidence and your belief in this team to be able to do anything of note.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I don't know about you, my Rams fans were feeling themselves in my comment section under my videos after the day. We're not tanking. We're not. Yes, you guys are. I'm sorry, they are. That's
I saw a lot of that too.
Yeah,
I mean, that a lot.
Shut up. And they act like we're the only ones saying it. Like, this is a national perspective on this issue. This is not a Brandon perspective. This is pretty much goes without saying what you guys did was obvious in your move. And that does make this a worse loss when you consider that. And that is the truth of the situation. Not that this Rams team's well, they might be competing in the playoffs. No, they won't. No, they won't. Nope, not going to happen. And it is one game, so this is something for us to track as we go forward. We're not trying to come to ultimate determinations, but we're looking at this game and what it was. And Brendan touched on this in the right way, and speaking about how embarrassing this was. I think as we go through these past other teams that might have games that were embarrassing, Brendan, be it that Browns game that was, well, at least you had a good defensive performance, or the Mora years like you talk about that, hey, that was a bad team. The expectations weren't there. This might be the most embarrassing loss for a team that has this kind of high expectations or this kind of consideration for where you expect them to go. And then to do it against an opponent that's one of the lesser opponents on top of that. One thing to have a bad performance against a middling team or something, but to do it against what I would consider a bad team, it definitely puts this in perspective. The most important thing I think of what you said though there, Brendan, was that this is not a one-off. And this is what gets me and you both in this place of a little worried, because we go, well, wait, we've seen it this year and we saw it that year and we saw it the year after that and multiple years over. And you can see the pattern right in there through, and it's clear and it's unmistakable, but we should ignore it because this is the first year of a new year, even though that pattern matches up. And that's the problem, is it does. The pattern matches up. You defensively in this game, and I studied this all 22. I'm going to be putting a video together here for this upcoming week, Brendan. And I really looked into every single one of these plays where we're getting beat over the middle. And what you can watch on it every single time over and over again is you have a four cloud cover over the top. It's like an umbrella of defenders over the top of the defense, playing and play out that I'm watching, where you end up with two guys high, two corners dropping to depth. And we can go and we can do all this whole game of, is it cover 4? Is it quarter half? Is it cover 3 with the is it Maple Man match? You can get into all of like that terminology stuff where we get lost in the woods despite the trees. But let's just take this down to a simplified point. If I'm watching on the all 22 and you're dropping 4 guys to depth, and that Rams team's not taking anybody to depth as far as a receiver goes, what you end up with then is 4 guys in depth covering nobody, and then it on everybody else ahead of them to cover how many other receivers are clearing through those zones. And that's what the Rams, in really base, simplified terms, without going too far and down the road on this, Brendan, that's what they were doing. And that's what we have also seen in these previous games in previous years. The Seahawks might correct this. They might fix this next week against Detroit and makes us all forget, oh, it was truly, they just overlooked them. They didn't play up to all the excuses you and I are hearing that are not quite adding up to us. But I will be very surprised if that's the case, because we have seen this in the past. This was there last year. Like you said, just teams weren't attacking that way. To add on to your point, you also played a lot of teams without quarterbacks who could really do much in pushing the ball up the football field. And so you had teams that they already had, like a Carolina team that had a good ground game. They were going to lean into it. A Raiders team that had a good ground game was going to lean into it. They weren't going to try to have to overthrow themselves or really attack what could have been the holes in that secondary at that point. I think this is potentially correctable, but I also wonder if Pete's willing to correct it. And that's where my next question comes back to you on this, is that when we look for the bright hopes of the secondary problems today, and we know that this has happened the last couple of years, isn't to say it's a bad team. Again, let's get there, because I'm just trying to go against what I know is going to be in the comment section here, Brendan, which is, let's get to the nuanced place of this. When it comes down to the future of the Hawks this year and moving in the future, can we trust with these secondary situations that Carroll is going to fix the same kind of problems that showed up this past week?
I think that's a game that has to destroy your trust. I feel like that's a game that if you're a fan trying to decide if you trust this team, if you trust this organization to do the right thing when it comes to coming up with a game plan to win the game, like, how does that not just kind of destroy your trust? Because you knew you were going to play this team for months. This is week 1. This team was on your schedule back in, what was it, March? They released the schedule. You knew they were playing this team. You knew what they had. You had a pretty good idea of what they were going to do. I know Carroll came out and said, oh, they spread their receivers out a little more wide than we're used to. I mean, they also switched from Pepsi to Coke in the vending machine, I guess. Like, okay.
Yeah,
Like that,
they're still rocking 11 personnel 70% of the time as they always do. But they aligned the receivers out a little wider, and that just threw us for a complete loop.
yeah.
I mean, come on. Like,
Yeah.
is that
Very
not
hard to buy that.
Yeah, and let me talk to you. Mentioned something too that is being mentioned too about we overlooked them. You're kind of touching on this. You're going down this line a little bit. The overlook thing doesn't add up to me either. We get to this, it becomes an excuse, not an explanation, first and foremost. A lot of these things that these are not in, like, how did we lose? Whatever. No, we'll go to an excuse that's not really backed by anything. You overlooked the team. The team overlooked the Rams. Okay. You've got Carroll's recent track record with McVay, where, as you mentioned, that one's Rams loss, he's flat out embarrassed him multiple times over. He's beaten him at home in the playoffs with his first quarterback going down and then taking out Stafford with a pin in his finger, and then he shreds you over the course of that
not
game.
Even Stafford.
Goff,
I wish.
Stafford. Goff shredded you in that game with a pin in his finger. This Rams team has given you fits at every turn. And yet you didn't have that team prepped and ready this upcoming week. Or what we'll hear is another excuse is, well, we didn't have a training camp. We didn't have enough preseason games. We didn't play enough in the preseason games. Well, yeah, the Rams didn't either. Why didn't it affect them that way? Why did it only affect you?
Yeah, Stafford didn't play a snap in the preseason, I don't think.
Yeah. And
a lot of played more in the preseason than Stafford did.
Yeah. It's just an excuse that rings a little bit hollow to me. And if you, and here's the other part with it, Brendan, two parts that I have a real problem. We come back to the coaching on this, which is number one, if you as a coach who's had a couple of years recently where your team started out slow, would you acknowledge that, especially defensively? They have started out tremendously slow over the past couple of years.
Yeah, they have.
So we got that track record. So if that's the case, then don't you get to a point then of saying, okay, it's been a couple of years where we start slow because maybe perhaps we're not playing enough preseason and getting these guys ready. So maybe this preseason period will actually get the guys ready. We'll put them out and we'll let them roll. We'll get those starters out there and let them go. Wouldn't you say that is a change? And he didn't make that adjustment. And we come back to, again, if sorry, I know I'm going on a rant here, but this is where I have he talks about championship opportunity every game, right? We don't overlook. We don't look down the line. It's about today, this game right now, championship opportunity. Is that not supposed to be a philosophy that enforces players to not overlook games, but to concentrate on the game at hand?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even really an excuse. And I don't know if Carroll thinks that it is, but like, if your team's overlooking your opponent, then it's your job to make sure they don't. It's your job to tell them, hey, don't do that. Knock that off. If the team isn't ready for the start of the season because they don't play in preseason, then it's your job to acknowledge that, hey, I got to take this risk of playing these guys in the preseason more. Mm-hmm. I mean, whatever it is, it's on him to figure out and do something about, not have it happen and then go, oh, geez, I guess that's the thing. It's kind of makes me think of this. He's just always a day late and a dollar short, it seems like. Because Sunday, after the game's over, he comes out and says, we played really bad, but we will adjust. And I'm thinking, do you think there are 8 quarters in a football game? It's too late to adjust, dude. Like, the game's over. You adjust at halftime. You adjust during a timeout. You don't say, we're going to adjust after the game's over. It's already too late. So, I don't know. It's just he's a day late and a dollar short over and over again.
It is, and I'm hoping they can find some fix here. But again, when I say if I'm looking for proof, I need some proof of it. And the issue we talk about on multiple of these issues, we're talking about things, be it a slow start for a defense over the last 3 years that's now coming back to play again, or the ways that they're getting attacked and how they're getting beat, which is back to the same kind of sort of chord, and it's the same old song on the same old chord. And that's where we get back to being really frustrated about it, because now how do we have hope that it gets fixed in the future? If you're the most idealistic person out there, optimistic, glass half full, when you look at this team right now, if just follow along at least with me and Brendan on this, where we go, okay, we closely watch this team and monitor it. We're seeing some of the same signs defensively of what we've seen in the past multiple times over, which indicates not a willingness to change anything. And now we're seeing it once again, but it will just change because moving on to the future of the season or future seasons, because what is their reason behind that gives them that confidence? I love that they have it. I wish I could have it too, as much at this point, but that's what, do you have do you have any theory on that, of where the answer is that we think that this is going to lie, and where suddenly the Carroll magically wakes up one day and goes, oh, got to change off this coverage?
I mean, I kind of feel like if it hasn't happened by now, it's just not going to happen. I think maybe it's a thing where it happens for a little bit, but then at some point we just go back to this because he believes this is the right way to play. He believes that this is the right thing to do. I find it hard to believe it's anything else, because we've had this happen over and over. Now, in a lot of the previous games that I'm talking about, the Seahawks still won, because Wilson bailed them out, or last year, honestly, Geno bailed them out. But now that you've lost a game like this, I don't know if you react to it a little bit differently, but I'm thinking about 2020. I actually looked this up for a video I made yesterday. First game of the year, you play the Falcons. Matt Ryan throws for 450. Second game, Cam Newton throws for 400. Third game, Dak Prescott throws for 500. Like, this is 3 games in a row, and you won all those games. So maybe it's just like, oh, it's not a big deal. We won anyway. It's fine. It's fine. It's whatever. Maybe losing a game, like getting basically blown out at home by this Rams team that is a bunch of spare parts, maybe it creates a different reaction. But I think it's pretty clear that he, for some reason, thinks that it's the right way to go about things.
Tell me if you think Carroll's thinking on this is aligned to those games you mentioned. If not, this is what probably the way that Carroll looks and views at that set of games. No, it wasn't the defense was failing and just giving up a crap ton of yards. It was that our offense was scoring so many points. They were forcing the opposition to feel like it had to score so many points to stay in step with the offense.
Yeah, and there is some truth to that. That offense was very good. It did force the other team to keep up. But that was a record. That was the most pass yards given up in NFL history by any defense through 3 games. So are you telling me we have the first good offense in NFL history? Are we just the first team in the NFL to put up a lot of points in the first 3 games? No.
Yeah. Well, and they kept
times.
And they kept that history setting pace was through like 8 or 9 games as far as that's them giving up that yards in the record number of yards in the air. It was just we ran into those bad opponents at the end that allowed us to, go through. I think I saw you had also had an interesting note about, taking guys like that you've seen on this defense that, play other places, play well, but then come here and you suddenly see a stark difference in the level of play from them. And one guy that I jumped out to me that you had mentioned on this was Dre'Mont Jones. And you had a really interesting stat on this. If you could give it to the folks out there on this one in regards, especially to his PFF grade, when you looked at
All right. Well, for starters, let me say, this is a small sample size, I know, but it's all I have to work with. We played 1 game. I understand that. But Dre'Mont Jones's PFF pass rush grade for that game on Sunday was 51.8, and he had 0 QB pressures. He had a higher pass rush grade in every single game he played last year, and in every game but 1 the previous year. And he also has had at least 1 QB pressure in every game he's played the last 2 years, except 1. So you can make a very good argument that last Sunday, the 2 days ago, was the least impact Dre'Mont Jones has had as a pass rusher in at least 2 years. I made the same argument with Julian Love. You look at his breakout season last year, every game he played, he was better in coverage than he was on Sunday in terms of what he gave up. It was 63 yards. The highest he had in any game last year was 51, and most games were way lower than that. So the argument I'm making here is I'm kind of over talking about players. It's hard for me to believe these guys get here and forget how to play football.
Yeah.
That's not how this is supposed to work. The Seahawks helmet is not a joke helmet in D&D that gives you like minus 20 strength, minus 20 stamina, and you wear it for a joke because you're trying to do like a hard mode run. No, it's not. It's a helmet like any other. And yet these guys are significantly worse. And I know it's just 1 game. They're going to have better games down the line. I understand that. But the point I'm making here is look at Jamal Adams. Look at Jamal Adams. Great in coverage, elite in coverage in New York. 2 years, QB rating when targeted under 75. Since he's been here, his QB rating when targeted is like 98 or something. Did he forget how to cover when he came to Seattle? Did he forget how to play football? I seriously doubt it.
Yeah. Well, we come back to it. It's not players. Maybe there's something bigger at play here, which is a little bit of the gist of what me and Brendan are trying to kind of hit as far as the nail in the head here. In that we've got some other data on this. We have multiple years of data. You got players that play better into other places, come here, play worse. We're not saying we're coming to final conclusions on this, folks. So please, again, understand this is an ongoing assessment for us. So as he said, we got 1 game to go off of, but we can operate off that 1 game for what it was, especially if it's part of a trend that we've seen in recent past history. And especially that game this past week, Brendan, felt just like, in a lot of ways, like almost a microcosm-like game of the 49er game, where you just weren't giving up the rush yardage, but the bottom line was all the same, in
Yeah.
that, and how it was playing off. But I think that that's an interesting thing. It's not to put the all end all be all PFF, but wait, why was this? So he's remarkably higher here, and he comes here and just kind of falls off. I don't think Draymond's forgotten how to play football. I don't think he's suddenly a bad player. He's a young guy, but I don't think he got paid and he's shutting it down either. But it is a little odd. And I do go back to at times, having talked to a former player on this, about, their want, especially thinking this year, Brendan, about wanting to stop the run, and how they teach their pass rushers, essentially, you got to stop the run first before you get to the passer. Whereas there's other organizations out there that will let their guys go kind of hunt, that they'll let them kind of, shoot those gaps and get after it. I don't know if the Hawks are still doing that, but I do wonder when you bring up that kind of, Dre'mont statistic and what's, going on. So
We stopped the run, though. We stopped the hell out of that run, right? So everything was cool, right? Like, that was the only thing. We stopped the run, so everything was cool.
It's all fine. It's fine. No, it's that part was at least, I guess, encouraging. 40 attempts, 93 yards. I know that, maybe to give people a little bit of a bright hope on this, Brendan, I'm putting together a video right now on Bobby from the game. And I know that he's got a lot of people that want to swing swords at him in the coverage side of things. He wasn't anywhere near the main problems for what we were dealing with in coverage this past week. He wasn't even in the neighborhood of the main issues. He is still a plus run defender. And watching the all 22 tape of it, you can talk all day you want about speed and whatnot, Brennan, but when if you have a chance to check or see this video, it's you really get to see, watching the all 22 tape with Bobby, and especially with Jordan right there next to him, the difference of having an instinctual player who can be a couple steps ahead of somebody beside him, and how that can overcome lack of speed and quickness at times. And I thought Bobby, on a variety of different snaps, just in the run game, was absolutely, phenomenal at times, and made some really great reads, shot the gap at times. She could have had 3 tackles for loss in this game, Brennan. He's credited for 1, but he had 2 others that went to Uchenna that he was the cause of. He was the guy that made that play happen. And I know you're a little slightly down with Bobby in recent years, but for me, this is what we brought Bobby in to do. Come in here and help us hem up this running game, get it stitched up. And he helped to provide that. Other guys played pretty good on that side of that thing too, Uchenna and Jaron Reed, but I thought that he was really, really outstanding in that aspect of his game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in love with the game that Bobby played. I think there's some real issues there. But I know that, again, I'm not interested in blaming any players, really. I'm not really interested in going after players right now. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it just seems to me there's a much bigger problem going on here. And I definitely don't think Bobby played bad. I just think you can see that he is a little bit slow. Sometimes the click and close is a little bit slow, but he finds ways to make up for it. And I know he's better than what we had last year. I'm pretty confident in that.
That's the most important part here, is that this doesn't happen with Bobby being on this team in just an empty, vacuous black hole. It happens with what's the alternative option. I think it's also tough too, because people see on the telecast, the guy drops back and throws it and completes it, and Bobby's near the guy. And so people go, well, Bobby gave up a completion there. I even think his PFF scores in this game were not accurately reflective of what was going on in coverage. As I was saying a bit before, and looking at the all 22 shots from the wide angles of this, when you've got the 4 defenders for the Hawks, 2 outside corners, 2 safeties, or sometimes just 2 players, and you've got a 4-man umbrella over the top, there's a couple of snaps here, Brendan, where you've got Bobby dropping back in his drop. He's got a receiver breaking in on his left. He's got a running back going out into the flat here, and he's got another receiver to his right, with nobody else ahead of him in the coverage to help out. Okay, so now, he picks the receiver A. They throw to the flat. That's on Bobby. He picks the receiver over here. They throw to the in-cutting route with Puka-Nuka. That's on Bobby. This is the problem when we come back to, from my standpoint, being more coverage-based than player-based. I know you said you weren't playing, but I'm just being from my standpoint out, where I think, and I'm speaking more to the people out there, not you on this one, where it's just the viewpoint of he's bad in coverage. Really do look back at that all 22 with what's going on in these plays. You mentioned Julian Love. Julian Love was the pointer in this game. He's doing no coverage, and he's just pointing at everything on the all 22 over here. And he's pointing at guys whose helmet isn't turned to him and isn't looking at him. And he's leaving guys going out of his space to do it. And I got to say, if it comes down to who's wrong on this, Julian Love or Bobby Wagner, I'm going to probably lean in to say probably Love made the wrong call on that. And it looks that way on the tape a lot of times. And again, probably then gets credit on PFF with not being as good in coverage. I ain't saying he hasn't lost a step and a half, maybe, and he isn't the same player in that part. But again, the coverage stuff for me was not on Bobby in this game. And I think he's better even than coverage than even people would like to sell it, where it's like, whoa, he's just, no, it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
Yeah. And because of these things that you're talking about, I it's hard for me to believe that any players, certainly any one player, but even players, is going to make this any better. Like this week we're getting Witherspoon back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're maybe getting Jamal Adams back. It's hard to believe that a player is going to make any of this okay.
We're going to see. I mean, and if it doesn't, I maybe that by that point people will, I hope it does. Let's just say that. It'd be great if this does. We want to see this turn around, and maybe it's just a one game off. That'd be great to see. But there are signs here, like we've tried to make the case to you folks on, that this is probably something that's going to, even with extra guys into the mix, might be a little bit of an issue as we kind of go forward, absent them making some major changes here, Brendan. Let me get caught up. I got a little bit behind on the donos here. William Leonard, thank you for the $2 donation. He says the fan base is fed up and pissed about this L. It's definitely the feeling that I've gotten from a good number of my subscriber base and commenters. I went pretty hard in my Sunday video with some of my, I guess some would call it maybe a rant. And I think, that I still kind of feel the same way a little bit. So I think the fan base and most of the comments I had in my deal were way more in pro favor and feeling the same way, that this feels like something a little bigger than just one game. I understand the people that want to push those breaks, but it's a tough sell for some of us Seahawks fans out there, isn't it?
It's not just one game. I'm sorry. That's completely missing the point. Like, it's just one game if this is the first Seahawks game you've ever watched. I understand why you might think that, or maybe you only watched the Seahawks last year and you're like, oh, it's the run defense. The run defense is the problem. But we've been watching this game over and over again for quite some time. 2020, I think we saw it like 8 separate occasions. 2021, remember, I think we were the first team in NFL history to give up 450 yards in 4 straight games.
Yeah. I mean, well, you mentioned 2019 Bengals at home, and that was the one with Dalton throwing the red rifle, went for almost 500 on us, and just
that was a Bengals team that got Joe Burrow. They went 2-14. That was a terrible Bengals team.
Yeah, it was insane on that one. So yeah, this has been long going. It's been ongoing, and William, I think me and Brendan share your frustration. I think a big majority of the fan base does. We want to see things get fixed. I've always say I can deal with there being a problem that comes up on a team. I will be patient with that, and I'll give them time to fix it. The problem or the issue where I'll start kind of pulling my hair out and stomping on the ground a bit is going to be when we see a team over a year's span have problems come up on a yearly basis and not work to fix those issues. And this has been one of those glaring issues that's been there for quite a bit of time in regards to these, to the coverage and the scheme and the way it's set up to put the players into success or not put them in a position for success. Slimy K, thank you for the $5 donation. He says, how much do you guys think Devin Witherspoon will change the game for us against the Lions? Do you have that one first?
I mean, it's better than what we would have otherwise. But again, I'm just not thinking a player is really going to make any of this better. The scheme is bad. The fundamentals are bad. I think you could add a lot of players, a lot of really good players that are proven to be good in other defenses, and I don't know what we would get out of them. I really don't know if they would help make anything better. I'm just not buying it.
Yeah, I think he will help in the respect of, I do think you put Devin in the slot versus Kobe Bryant in the slot. I just never have been a big believer in Bryant working out of that position and being successful at it. I know he had the turnovers, and he kind of came a little bit along through the year as the year went on, but it just doesn't feel like a fit for me with him as it does with Devin. That's part of the reason I've been so open to Devin moving into that slot, from the jump. I tend to agree with you that it's probably not going to have a significant amount of impact. Some of this does get hard because we are in one game here, Brendan. I think the part that you and I do have to acknowledge in this last game against the Rams that I didn't give credit for on Sunday, which I do want to give credit now because I want to make sure we're all balanced with this. Matt Stafford had himself an amazing game. That guy, played out of his mind at certain times in this game, not only showing off the arm strength, but the ball placement, the decision-making, getting through his reads. He was outstanding in this game. He was executing that offense at a really, really high level. Now, some of this, of course, is too, Brendan, with this. You helped him to do that by, what is it? What I hear that this is the worst pass rush the NFL's had in a given game in 5 years, something like that? Or how's that stat go?
Yeah, something around there. And watching it, I believe it. Like, I watched that game. I don't think Stafford got hit once.
I don't either. And that's where I do come back to when people say the Stafford thing, I think there's some validity behind it, Brendan. But then the problem comes for me when we come down to one real base stat, when you just put it on Stafford having a game of excellence. And that is 2.64. Matt Stafford had the ball out of his hands on average on Sunday in 2.64 seconds. Last year, the San Francisco 49ers led the league in getting the ball out of their quarterback's hands at the fastest rate of anybody else at 2.6 seconds. To put it in perspective. So here's where we come back to, okay, if in my mind I'm thinking it's the soft zone coverages that are allowing easy and short plays, I would think then that I would look to the data of Stafford and how fast he gets the ball out, and it would be very quick. And the data indeed does match that and is succinct with that. And then again, we come to, if you don't think this is a problem and we can stay in these soft zones moving throughout the rest of the course of this year and well, it's just not Stafford cutting us up, right, Brendan? Well, but Brock Purdy also plays you twice, and he absolutely showed a willingness, and he's shown a willingness to take exactly what the defense is going to give him, isn't he? And you play, so this is where we go. Is it a future problem? Is it something that carries forward these kind of coverage, issues and problems? Sorry, go ahead.
No. I got nothing to add to that.
But yeah, Slimy, it will help. I think it's going to be marginal. It may help a little bit more in a game like this. I like to call Jared Goff, like Simple Jack from Tropic Thunder. I call him Simple Jared, because he is a guy that wants the game to be very easy and simple for him. And the rub is that if you let that happen, he will slice and dice you, and he will look like a top-notch quarterback. If you can make him uncomfortable, if you can get him moving around, if you can make him not trust what he's seeing out there, well, now you can start to take advantage of him a little bit. There was we'll be getting more into this, of course, on our preview show. Brendan, I've got a play to talk about on this next Thursday when we talk about that in regards to something that illustrates this very thing with Jared. So, Jared wants to go to, my whole long winding point on this is Jared wants to go to Amon St. Brown. He probably wants to work him like he did against the Kansas City Chiefs over and over again if he can have the opportunity to do so. And if Witherspoon can shut those routes down and lock him up a little bit and force now Goff to have to go to other extra reads, maybe that makes the game just a little bit more complicated for Goff. And certainly there was a reason that the Rams moved off of Goff for Stafford. You're getting two different, I think, quarterbacks, especially when Stafford's healthy and at the full height of his powers as he showed this past week.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's just, in order to have Witherspoon take away the Amon-Ra St. Brown stuff, you got to actually put him in a position where he can do that. And are we going to do that? It's hard for me to believe it until I see it. I'm not going to just take it on faith after what I saw in that first game. Like, yeah, Kobe Bryant or, I guess it was Kobe Bryant for pretty much the entire game playing the nickel now that I think about it. But I know he's not a great in that role, but you didn't even really give him a chance, it felt like. I know Kobe had awful numbers from this game, but it's hard for me to even get mad at him for anything. It's like, you put him in this situation, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, it's not necessarily too. I just think Kobe's probably more an outside corner in this league, and that's probably where he would be at his best. Doesn't mean he'd be dominant over there or really great over there, but I just keep coming back to, I think that's probably where he would feel most comfortable and do his best damage. He could be functional slot, he could be functional in the safety position, but where is he at his best and what's best for the team? I think those are two different things when it comes to Kobe Bryant. Witherspoon, with watching the tape with him coming out of Illinois and the snaps that he would get in the slot, he looked dominant coming out of Illinois in those snaps that you put him there. And so I think that there's just a good chance that Witherspoon, with that twitchiness that he has and that explosiveness that he has that Kobe Bryant doesn't quite have, is going to be enough for the coaches to think that he can do better on those twitchy slot-like guys that you get in there that are so quick. So doesn't come down to, you say about, is it going to put him in position to succeed? I think what you're meaning by that is, are they going to just put him in the slot and then drop him in his own coverage?
Right. Exactly.
I'd make a strong argument that if you're putting Witherspoon and committing to putting him into the slot, you're committing at that point to run at least man-based concepts out of the slot. Maybe I am just being too kind and I'm unwilling to, like you say, just pay attention to what we've seen in the recent track history where that's just not been the case. But I also think it's also that in a guy like Kobe Bryant, you have a guy that's more based in zone going into the slot. So maybe you run more slot-based principles when you do have him in the slot. Now, when you have a guy that actually can run man-based principles in the slot, maybe you actually run man-based principles as you would normally do, even if you're running cover 3 on the outside in a normal defense. You're more often not going to have that guy running man. You're not going to run a lot of zone in there with him most of the time. So it'll be interesting to monitor that part of this game, though, Slimy, because I guarantee you they're going to probably put him on. It's going to be a fun matchup.
Yeah. I don't know. My trust level is pretty low right now because we spent this whole offseason getting guys who fit a man-based defense, an aggressive defense. and then we played like that in the first game. So I don't know. My confidence is just really, really low right now.
I think it's understandable, man. Thank you, though, Slimy, for that donation. Jeff Speak, thank you for the $5 donation. He says, the math doesn't lie, gentlemen. It's week 1, and the Hawks are playing football. It's a team game, and when you get hurt, it hurts as well as tomorrow.
I feel like there's more to that thought that, like, I don't know. I'm not sure what the. I feel like there was supposed to be some sort of thing being said at the end there that didn't come through.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure either, Jeff, on that. Thank you for the $5 donation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure of what you were saying on there. So I'm sorry. Yeah, it does look like something might have got cut off on your message. I'm sorry about that. But now it doesn't lie. It's week 1. The Hawks playing football. Team game when you hurts as well as tomorrow. Yeah, I'm sorry, Jeff. I don't quite. We're both a little flummoxed by that one. But I thank you for the donation. Feel free, if you can put it in the comments, maybe what you meant to elaborate on. I'll try to read it if I can see your message down in the comments.
I'll try to keep an eye out for it as well.
Green 80, thank you for the $14 donation. Very kind of you, Green 80. Sorry, a little late on acknowledging the donos. Me and Brandon got we got to get my blood up here early on here tonight. But thank you, Green 80, for that $14 dono. He says, it's time for a change in Seattle. It was a great run by a Hall of Fame coach. Changed the game for sure. But the game changed again, and he hasn't adjusted since. That's my take. Won't say any names.
I mean, after that game being what it was, I don't think you can blame any Seahawks fan for feeling that way. I can't say anything bad about it. Like, we were pretty soft on Carroll last year because overall, I think we both felt he was doing a pretty good job. Not a great job, but a good job.
Yeah.
But that's not good enough. We're not here so we can go through this up and down of lose in the first round, miss the playoffs, lose in the first round, miss the playoffs. At some point, you got to actually climb the mountain.
That's exactly it. And it's been a long period of time, not just this year, but if we look at Carroll's history here and you remove 2012 to 2015, which is the other times that exist on either end of that nice run that you had, for which for 4 years you set the league on fire defensively. You're the number 1 DVOA team in the league that time. You look at the other spots around that, though, and it's a different performance as far as the defense goes. And you haven't had a chance to turn this over multiple times over. You've had issues going on for a couple of years here that continue now, it would seem, into this season. For the folks that get into the line in the standpoint that you are, Green 80, like Brendan, I have a lot of sympathy for you. I'm not out here calling for heads. I'm not out here calling for firing. I've been very clear on that with Carroll. But I've also said through this process, it's an evaluation of him too. I liked, like you say, what he did last year. And we were very, soft on that because, look, you're right side of this trade. You're showing willingness to maybe adapt and move to the new. But part of that was also the built-in of you've gone to the Fangio scheme. So we're going to give you credit for that. We didn't know you weren't really going to go to the Fangio scheme. I mean, Brendan, are we watching the 3-4 defense out there? Maybe I'm getting old now, man. Maybe my eyes are starting to do that thing where they're creating extra guys in places that aren't there. But to my eyes, it looks more like we got a 4-man front up there a little bit. It doesn't quite look like the Fangio scheme 3-4.
It's like a 4-man front, and sometimes the edge rushers are standing up, so it's like a 2-man front. But in functionality, it acts the same. And whatever it is, it doesn't work, clearly, or it didn't work in that game, not even close. So, I mean, I'm not personally offended by a 4-man front, but I just know that it didn't work. And I also know a lot of players on your team are built for a 3-4. Dre'Mont Jones has played his whole career in a 3-4. Nwosu spent his whole career in 3-4s. So you need to put those guys in the right situations to allow them to flourish and do what they do.
Indeed. And so that's where a little bit of this comes back to line for me of you also need to embrace making those changes. And we saw this with Wagner's scheme where the first year they didn't institute it really. But then by the second year, they let him kind of run full whole hog last year. And that's part of why you had the successes. And that's why I was thinking we were going to get that from Carroll as we went through into last year, into this year. But not quite there yet. We haven't quite arrived at that spot where he's really adopted that full change he knows he needs to make, which is to update this thing. There's a long lineage of coaches that have coached 40, 50 years in the NFL, and then they get to the end of their run, and they're risk averse. They're not willing to adapt to where the game is going. They're housed in the old ways. And you've got to be aware of that as an aging coach. You got to be aware of that. Like, this is something that tends to happen to these guys that get to this age. And I got to kind of fight against that, because that's going to be the end of my coaching career if I lean into that, because it was for them. And that's really what I would harp on there if I could move Carroll and talk him into is like, don't lean into this. Don't keep holding on and grasping with a white knuckle grip to all of your old ways that have long been proven in the certain specific fashions we're talking about to not work as much anymore. Go to the new, like you did with the offense. I mean, Brendan, they went 57% passing last year. Could you ever imagine a time during the Legion of Boom years that they would have thrown 50% of the time like they did last season?
I mean, no. And a big reason why is because your defense was good enough to where you didn't have to do that. I understand it's situational, but still, it's something that never happened. Even when Russ was like runner up for MVP a couple of times.
Yeah.
Even when he was putting up those elite numbers, you never did anything like that. So no, you wouldn't have.
No, you wouldn't come out and start aggressively throwing the ball like they did last year so many times over, leaning into that side. And to me, it spoke, okay, there's some understanding. I got to do that. And now we got to do this on the other side, the defensive side of the ball. You've got to understand, okay, I've got to leave this old thing that I'm so firmly affixed in to understand that if we're going to keep this going, if I'm going to have my last kind of legs here as a coach to find the mountaintop one more final time, then it's got to be on the back of evolving. And if I stay stagnant, I'm not going to get there. And that's just, it is really the clear kind of bottom line as it stands right now for Coach Carroll. And then we'll see which way it goes with it, Green 80. But well said. And I understand anybody that's in the camp that you're in or feels the way you feel about this, because it has been a couple of years now. This is 2014 was a long time ago. And leaning on that as the end all be all excuse and the end all be all cover up for every issue that shows up on the team is not quite right at this point, in my opinion. Another donation here. Thank you again, Green 80, for that dono. Sorry, here I'm a little lost in the chat here. Daniel Bailey, thank you for the $2 donation. It says 6 out of 81 snaps with 3 down linemen. Fake 3-4-D. You stole the thoughts right out of my mind here, Daniel. Just what I was talking about. Yeah,
yeah. You look at the snap counts from that game. Our defensive linemen, it felt like there weren't even enough snaps among all the defensive linemen to even get to 2 down linemen on every snap. It was like 1.8 per snap. I was like, how did that happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what's weird about this is that we're going through the same thing on the defensive side of the ball that we did on the offense, Brendan. I mean, remember, we were having shows on at the time. And remember the thing I would say is, okay, you want to steal from Sean McVay. You're taking one of his prodigal sons. You're bringing him here to make him an offensive coordinator. You're not stealing in a bad way, stealing in a way teams do all across the league. Teams have stolen coaches from us. Not a bad thing, but you're stealing this coach. You can't treat the offense you're bringing in like a buffet. I want some of this. I want some of that. No, not that. That's bad. That's icky. I don't want any of that. I'll have a little bit of this. You've got to adopt the whole offense whole hog so that it can work in its proper functioning state. It's a complicated offense with a lot of moving parts. You can't just piecemeal it. And indeed, when they finally didn't do that last year, Brendan, when they finally leaned into the machinations of this offense, they found some of the best successes in throwing the ball that this franchise has ever seen by setting records. And they could maybe do the same thing if they leaned into the same way in the defense. But it's going to require Carroll to relinquish that white knuckle grip. And that's the part that you or I just don't know if that's going to be something that's in his wheelhouse to do. He loves his defense. That's his baby. And I don't know.
You're going to have to rip it away from him maybe. And maybe that's what's going to happen. Like, I obviously he's got a longer leash than your average coach out there to run things the way he wants to run things. But I got to believe there is some limit. And by the way, I'm sorry for my camera lagging. I don't know what's going on with it lately. I assume the audio is still okay?
Yeah, you're good on the audio.
Okay. But yeah, I assume there is some point where they would go like, okay, we're putting all this money into your defense and getting 0 results. What the heck? Like, I haven't looked at the numbers yet, but I assume at least through week 1, we are a bottom 5 defense in terms of yards. I don't know if we are, but I would bet if I had to guess, I'd say we're probably right there, at least in pass defense, especially. And you just played an offense that, and Rams fans get mad at me when I talk about this, but I don't care. And you know what? If the Rams are actually good in a couple months, then I guess I missed. But I'm looking at a 5th round rookie being the centerpiece of their passing attack. I'm looking at an offensive line that has 1 name player. They didn't even have Brian Allen in this game, by the way. It was Havenstein and then a bunch of nobodies. So what are you going to do against a good offense? What are you going to do against this Lions offense that was top 5 last season and probably got better?
Yeah, it worries you. It does. This is a lot more of an offensive threat than what you got last week, especially the offensive line, though it sounds like maybe they'll be without their left tackle. So, maybe that'll give us a little bit more hope here, Brendan. But yeah, It's another one of those open places, Daniel, here. If you want to look at their adoption of the Fangio scheme the last year and a half and go, okay, what can we maybe do some more of here to better this or fix this or take this in the right direction? And for my money, some more 3-4 implementation would be nice. You don't have to necessarily do away with all those 4-man fronts, but don't lean on it at such this high rate where it's just not working for you. You're not getting the pass rush. I guess you stopped the run. So maybe some of it was in that being able to do that, but having the extra guys in the secondary drop back in coverage off those 4-man fronts wasn't doing you any favors. You weren't squeezing down in any zones. Guys were wide open out there running around in that secondary. Thank you though. Appreciate that donation. And I appreciate you too. Empower Code. Thank you for the $10 donation. Says tough loss, but we will remain faithful. Much love to the Killer Bees. Go Hawks. Go Hawks. Empower Code. And we will absolutely remain faithful here. We're not bailing on this team. We're not coming to any final conclusions off of one game, but we are going to read off of what we saw in the one game and, give you guys our opinion on where it goes and what it's, we're trying to read a little bit of tea leaves here and how we see this team going from a trending standpoint or if we've seen a pattern. But yeah, it is just one game at the end of the day. There's 16 games left in this season and you never know. We definitely start usually under Coach Carroll stronger than we start. That's always been kind of mostly the case. So hopefully that can once again be the case this season, Brendan.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, the thing I keep saying is we're going to be chasing this loss for a lot of this season in all likelihood. Even if we do end up having a good season, we're going to get to some point and go, oh, man, if we had beaten the Rams, we would have made the playoffs. Or if we had beaten the Rams, we would have won the division. Or we would have done this, we would have done that. You're chasing that win for the rest of the season. This is not baseball where one game is essentially meaningless. You only play 17 of them. So that whole it's just one game thing doesn't really resonate with me the way it does in other sports. I'm sorry.
It doesn't me either. It's part of what bothers me when we just go to these simple explanations for what happened in this past game to say, well, it was just one game. Nothing is ever that simple, number one. But number two, this is a sport where every game does matter. We learned that last year, Brendan. I think we would have been in a bit of a different place as far as who we played in even the first playoff game had we gone out there and beat one of those NFC North teams or a couple of those NFC North teams, but you didn't do it. You went 0-4 against all of those, and those were bad teams. So we'll have to see how it goes. I'll just have to see how it goes. Thank you, though, Empower Code. Go Hawks, brother. Appreciate you. Connor Oswagler, thank you for the $5 donation. Says Witherspoon and Adams could have a more indirect effect on the defense. Team could have a different scheme prepared for when they play. God, I hope, right, Brendan? You
would hope so, but that implies that there was some thought put into what they did in that Rams game, and I don't feel like there was. I think they just kind of went on autopilot. I feel like they went on autopilot and just went, well, this is what we usually do, so let's just do this. It should be good enough. And I kind of feel like that's all there is to say about it. And I'm not down with that. But you're right. Adams can do stuff that other players can't do. Witherspoon can do things that guys like Trey Brown and Mike Jackson can't do. So we'll just have to see it. But I'm not going to take it on faith. Not right now.
Yeah, we're going to have to see how it plays. We've still not gotten a chance to see any action of Witherspoon too, Connor, at this point. So it's also, where is he at in his development? Where is he at as far as being, play ready goes? How many snaps can he play? Same thing, especially that is the truth too with Adams as far as where he is and how long he still might take, to kind of get back to being full speed, even if he's on the actual football field. There's an opening here for what the coaches are going to possibly do here, Connor, moving forward. And that is that we can't get pass rush with the front four. So now we're going back to more of trying to run some more blitz heavy stuff. And if they do that, technically they'll be doing different things and probably trying to run some more man-based concepts. We'll see if they can maybe have some more success with that. I've got to say it can't be worse than dropping into the soft zone coverages like they did this last Sunday and getting picked apart to death. That's certainly, I can't think it going worse. And I would have to feel like if you did bring some pressure-based stuff, maybe you could actually cause some turnovers and get some sacks and get the offense a little bit more, uncomfortable at that point because Stafford was really comfortable back there in the pocket this last game. So it's possible, Connor. I would be hopeful that they would do it. But, we've never really seen Carroll being willing as much to run a lot of man-based concepts on the back of blitzing heavy. That's not really ever been his bag. Even when he ran Jamal Adams in 2020 at like a 13% blitz rate, that was still just 5-man fronts that you were running most of the time. It was a 4-man front. Jamal comes down as the 5th guy, And if the offensive line doesn't slide protection, he's going to have a free route to go make a sack. If they slide protection, everything gets neutralized. It's basically how it kind of ran down. So
Right.
I wouldn't call that a pure blitz at that point. If you're just doing kind of the 5-man stuff with Adams, I'm talking blitzing from different angles, blitzing multiple guys, creating numbers games at times for the quarterback where you're going to have a free rusher and they're not going to have a blocker to get him, make the quarterback figure that out. They don't do a lot of that stuff, but it doesn't mean that they shouldn't, Connor. Doesn't mean you're not wrong.
Yeah, I mean, anything's got to be better than what we saw out there on Sunday.
Would you be for that if they came out and they had a little more of a blitz heavy man?
Oh, yeah,
man
absolutely.
Match?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, at least you're trying something a little different. I could get behind that.
That's right. If it failed, I wouldn't be knocking for it. Be like, just like you said, at least you guys are trying something different. At least you're not just going, that didn't work. Try the same thing. That didn't work. Try the same thing. Still didn't work. Okay. This time, yeah. Try the same thing. At least you're doing something different. And you do have now, the nice thing with doing this with Witherspoon Adams or Julian Love, who was also in a blitz heavy scheme last year, is now, unlike if you were to try to do it before, you actually have the personnel to make it happen.
Yeah. I'm hoping, but one player should not be a linchpin to everything you do on defense. One player should not go out. And by the way, when you have time to plan, you knew Witherspoon wasn't going to play in this game for realistically probably weeks. So you have time to come up with something better than that. So even if we do see something better in week 2 with Adams and Witherspoon, it's still going to be like, okay, so you're telling me we have to have Jamal Adams on the field or else our defense is going to be league worst. That's I feel great about this season.
Yeah, if that is the reality, just it's another thing that we talk about. It's not a great reflection then back to the coaching staff that you've hitched all of your wagons in that way. It kind of doesn't add up. And other teams, I don't think, do that in the same way. They can still be functional at that point. I mean, hell, the Chiefs were without Chris Jones against this Lions offense last week, and they kept the Lions to 21 points, 14 points
because there was a pick 6. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because there's a pick 6. So I mean, it's like not all these defense teams around the league. I mean, Aaron Donald was out for a lot of the league for the Rams most of the year last year for the Rams. They were still a pretty good defense last year overall. It doesn't mean just because you lose one player, everything should just go to hell if that is the case. And maybe we'll find that is the case out, Brendan, or maybe they'll find that no, Adams is the thing that makes this whole thing run and work and go. Jared Goffrey, thank you for the $10 donation. Says, one argument I constantly hear is we're better off with Pete Carroll compared to purgatory, like we experienced in the 90s. It's obvious we're in purgatory now. Time for a change. Football isn't fun anymore. Beautiful. I love your comment, Jared. I really do, by the way. It's just well placed. Brendan, fear-based decision-making, isn't that always the best stuff when you make a decision because you're scared? I think that you always make the best decisions when you're freaked out and you're rattled to your bones about what might be the outcome if you make that decision? Do you make smart decisions that way? Do you make fruitful decisions that way?
I can't think of any instance where you do.
No.
I mean, isn't this the same game the Wilson fanboys tried to play? The Russell Wilson fanboys? Like, oh, if you lose Wilson, you're going to go back to Rick Meyer and have 10 years with no quarterback. And we replaced Wilson with somebody better literally instantly, literally overnight. We found a quarterback who's already better than Wilson is right now.
Exactly.
So, no, by the way, I know somebody's going to get mad about that. No, I'm not saying Gino's better than Wilson was.
Just have better right now.
Yeah. But anyway, so things turn around quicker than you would think. Typically, I think in this sport, especially now, we're seeing these teams go from being just bottom of the barrel awful to really, really good really quickly, usually on the back of some major change.
Mm-hmm. It is something that is often said, Jared, and if for folks that maybe not understand completely what Jared, what he's meaning in his comment on this, it's that there's a contingent of Seahawks fans that basically say, well, we have to give Pete Carroll basically a blank check. Like he gets to decide when he retires. You can never criticize him. You just need to celebrate him for the fact that he helped us win a Super Bowl and understand that if he's not here, we're going to be in the dark ages again of the 90s. That is, and that is the only reality. It's either that we are our only two options. It's a binary choice. We either have Carroll and potentially a mediocrity / being slightly good and in the playoffs every year, or we're in football purgatory. There is no in between. There is no better place. I have a tremendous problem with this argument because it totally ignores recent history. This team changed its ways from where it was in the 90s, from where it was in the 80s. This team became a winning organization when Paul Allen bought this football club, put his money behind this football club, got the new stadium made, brought in the right coach to run this show. And then Mike Holmgren had a guy that got you to a Super Bowl. If this whole thing of Coach Carroll is somehow the only Messiah to ever lead us to the promised land thing is true, then we shouldn't have been led to the promised land within the last 4 years prior to his arrival. That doesn't add up in your argument if you're going to try to make that. I'm not saying I know. And again, this just to make sure I'm clear with this, Brendan, because I want to make sure I'm getting ahead of these comments, and I want to make sure if anybody posted, they look stupid for saying it. Neither me or Brendan are calling for Coach Carroll to be fired here. We haven't said that once throughout this show. We're pointing out some issues and problems we have. We're going to continue to monitor it, but let's just make sure we're being just super clear with that, because I think people will get stuck in that lane of it. But this thought process that somehow he's the end and be all, that the sun rises and sets behind Coach Carroll and him alone is so wrong. There are other places that you can go. There are other options. They may be worse. They may be better, but it's not a certainty that another option is just worse in the way that some of you folks will talk about this in that way. And I love Coach Carroll. I understand that there's part of this is a little bit emotional based too. I don't want to see Carroll go. I love him. He brought the title and all that, but I don't think we can just do the blank check thing here either. I don't think that we can just go, well, give it another 5 years. And if we haven't done anything at that point, then okay, he's almost, then we'll do what we got. That's not, I can't subscribe to that myself. That just doesn't feel right. And it doesn't feel what other teams do in football. The Eagles have won a Super Bowl prior to us even going to the Super Bowl. And then they fired that coach. They moved on from quarterbacks. They turned that whole team around and they got back to a Super Bowl. And now they're one of the front runners in the NFC to go back to it again this year. They didn't get housed in, well, that guy got us our Super Bowl. We've got to celebrate him for 10 years and give him the blank check and never think about ever moving on. It's a very Pacific Northwestern attitude on this one a little bit. It's strange to me. And I'm not knocking people for it, because I think it's all coming out of a place of respect for Carroll, respect for what he's done here. And I get that. But there does come a part where we got to split between those two factors, where you can celebrate Carroll, you can celebrate him winning a Super Bowl and look at the here and now and go, yeah, but where is this team going? What's happening with this team right now in this moment? In 2023, as we're on the precipice of turning the calendar over to 2024.
Yeah, I mean, we can have those conversations in the offseason if the season doesn't go well. We definitely don't need to be talking about firing Pete right now. It's not going to happen right now. That's something we can evaluate much, much later than right now.
Yeah, but I do get where you're coming from, Jared. I understand your feelings on this, and you're not alone. I've seen many comments since I posted my video on Sunday that have are along and kind of align that same way. It's not that everybody's in that place. But even if you disagree with the stance if you're a Seahawks fan, you need to acknowledge and understand that there is a large contingent of the fans who do feel this way. And they're not just being emotional. They're not just being, getting in their feelings after one game. As me and Brendan tried to illustrate at the start of the show, there's some of this that's been going on for a while now, which is why it's got people a little bit sore about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I said, the thing that I'm really trying to come back to over and over and over again after that game is it's not just one game. Yes, it's just one game in the sense that for this season, we have played one game, but the concerns go back way further than just one game. I saw a stat, the last 3 seasons, the Seahawks are either number 1 or number 2 in number of defensive snaps.
Mm-hmm.
So even when the defense is pretty good, like 2021, that defense actually ended up being all right. It was, I think, ranked 11th in the league in scoring by the end of the season. And it was even a little bit better than that because a lot of those points were on the offense and some of them were in garbage time. It was borderline top 10 defense, but they were still on the field more than any other defense. So there's still some big fundamental problem that is holding them back from ever being elite. Can you ever imagine a scenario where a defense stays on the field for more snaps than any other defense and manages to still be elite? It's pretty much impossible.
No, I don't believe that it can happen. I also think that defense, Brendan, over the course of the season is going to get beaten down, and you're going to have more guys injured than normal teams across the league. What I'm saying is you're not going to be at your strongest by the end of the year because of that either, because of those factors. If you're playing a whole extra, I think that one year, Brendan, they played like a whole extra game of snaps equivalent wise with all of those snaps they played defensively. Okay. That's going to knock you down a couple of guys over the course of that season, having to run through those snaps that much, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, it's part of why I like a little bit more of the risk, no biscuit thing, where you risk it and maybe you give up a big play from time to time. You get some game-changing plays on the other time of it, but then your defense isn't necessarily on the field 24/7 either all the time, as it's been the case here. That's also in linemen too, Brendan, with the third down conversion stuff. We've had problems with third down conversion rates on offenses in recent history too. And again, it comes back to soft zone defenses, protecting against the deep ball, unwillingness to blitz at any point in time, like a league minimum blitz rate out there. It was weird to me too, Brendan, watching this game against the Rams, because you saw them on the flip side, willing to actually blitz, willing to send extra defenders, manufacture some pass rush to help out a team not very talented on that side of the ball. Interesting to see two different defenses. They're supposedly the same defenses, both Fangio defenses. You have one here, way less talented, who's willing to manufacture and ends up having a better produced day against a much tougher offense, whereas then our defense looks completely in over their head and can't do anything, not having anywhere near that same kind of level of aggression. It's hard for me not to go, whoa, why don't we do more of that? Why don't we maybe do more of that? What happens when we put that level of aggression with this level of talent? But maybe I'm thinking of it just too simplified in that aspect of things, Brendan. Mike McGee, thank you for the $1 super sticker. Nothing posted in your comment there, but thank you for the donation nonetheless, man. I hope you're having a good night. Appreciate you guys watching too. Please hit that like button if you could for me. Kasra Solari, thank you for the $5 donation. Says, in years past, Pete has had an excuse for the bad defense, but now there is no excuse for a defensive genius to be bad with the talent he has.
I mean, I honestly, the year I thought he had an excuse for a bad defense was the year our defense was decent, 2018. Like, that defense had no talent, and it's better than any defense we've had since, except maybe 2021, and it's very close. Like that 2020 defense had a lot invested in it, and for the first half of the year, it was the worst in the league. This defense has a lot. Like last year's defense had a decent amount invested into it. The year before, it had a ton invested into it. I don't know if I think there was even an excuse in some of these years past.
Yeah, agreed on this one, Brendan. It's really hard for me to find an excuse here for Carroll to say, well, I just need to get a little more talent in here. Well, we just need one more draft to get some more talent in here. He's turned over since the Legion of Boom era ended. He's turned it over like 2-3 times, trying to find the answers, trying to find the players, this isn't just a one-off thing where we just got back to just giving this a shot. LOB just ended. This is like our second year now with a new, no. And Brendan talked about this. This is not to be undersold. Carroll's been vice president. He might've had some of those powers relinquished from him 2 years ago. And that's why we've had some of the great drafts we've had with Schneider, because he's running unfettered. But before that point of view, he was not unfettered. He had Carroll in his ear and able to tell him on any given pick, you take this guy. On any given trade, you make that trade. I said this on Sunday, you didn't make training camp deals for offensive players. You went out there and got Sheldon Richardson one year. And then another year, you went and spent a 3rd round pick on Jadeveon Clowney. And then you went out another year and did a Jamal Adams trade. And then you did a 5th round pick at Quandre Diggs midseason and a Carlos Dunlap midseason trade. When it comes to his defense, it's been kind of the baby of this team. And it's like he's getting all these assets poured, but we're getting diminishing returns. Something doesn't quite add up in that mix. And it does make it hard to go back to using excuses like, well, it's a 1 game off. Well, it's just the start of the game of the year. Well, Matt Stafford was playing like a Hall of Famer. It's hard to just lean into those simple excuses when there seems to be a much more complicated answer here at hand just a little bit. Well said, Casper.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
No, nothing beyond that.
Appreciate you, Kasra. Thank you for that donation. And we are very much in the same kind of mental state, I think, as far as our outlook on this one. Upo, thank you for the $10 donation. He says, I've said this before. If I was an opposing offensive coordinator, I know exactly how I would attack our defense. Good offensive coaches, Shanahan, McDaniel, Reed, McVay, will carve this D up all day. Not wrong. What do you think about that, though? Let me give you your thoughts, open thoughts on that one.
I mean, I think they already kind of have. I think they already have. It's not they will. They already have. But sometimes it's not even a good offensive coach. Sometimes it's like Dan Quinn.
Yeah.
When he was still the Falcons coach. I think it was still Dan Quinn. I can't remember for sure. But if it wasn't, it was an interim coach, and that's even worse.
You're touching on something so important here, and I think it is the truth. I mean, you're not wrong, Upo, in that the genius coaches can do that for sure. But even the mid coaches offensively, like Brendan just said, are able to do this. And the reason goes to this. You had the LOB come in, I'm calling the LOB defense, not the LOB team, but just this defense came in with Carroll back in the 2010s. Nobody was running the defense throughout the league. Nobody was looking for 6-foot corners on the outside. What I'm trying to say here is it had ingenuity into it. It was, even though it was an old defense, it was sort of one of those things where the rest of the league's going this way, you're going that way, and you can take advantage of things by zigging when everyone else is zagging. But then what you gave teams, and it's by the byproduct of your success, by the byproduct of having your defensive coaches go out in the league like Gus Bradley and Dan Quinn and run your scheme, is that teams then learned your scheme backwards and forwards. And guess what? It's not terribly complicated, so there's not a whole hell of a lot there to learn. Chris Sims talked about this 3 years ago, a guy who was very, very good friends, in fact, best friends with Kyle Shanahan. And he said what's known around league-wide right now is that there's a book, and it's called the Seattle Beater Plays. That's how it's referenced. And you have a track line of plays that you can go through and call upon going against the Seattle defense that are highly likely to be successful by the nature of the coverages that they run. And not a whole lot's changed since Sims talked about that a couple of years ago. It's unfortunate, but it's at the heart of this. You run a very simplified coverage. If I do anything in life simplified, if I play a video game against you, Brendan, and I'm playing simplified, and you know the game, and you know all the attack manners you can go at, you know all the complicated ways you can hit me, I'm probably not going to beat you, even if I'm good at one particular thing. Even if I do one particular thing great, you got all this extra stuff that you can call upon to take me down. And that's a little bit of what it feels like to me.
Yeah. Honestly, at this point, you'd have to be a bad offensive coach to not understand how to exploit this defense, right? And maybe that's what it is. Maybe a few times a season we run into these bad offensive coaches that don't understand how to take advantage of us. So we play well and we're like, oh, okay, everything's all right now because look how good we did in this game. And eventually you would think that those bad offensive coaches are, over time, eventually they're going to start figuring this stuff out, right?
I think to your point on that, if you look over a track record, let's say of the last 8 years, I bet that number has incrementally decreased of the number of coaches you catch off guard or who don't think well enough of it, even up to last year. You go to that 4-game stretch that some like to point to of like, well, the 4-game stretch is proof of Carroll back, where you played 2 games against the Cardinals, you played 1 game against the Chargers, and you played 1 game against the Giants. That was the 1 4-game spot where the defense looked good. And it's like, well, 2 of those games against the Cardinals, one of the worst offenses in the league that was basically non-functional for a large part of the season. Then you have the Giants, which run the kitschy offense of the read option stuff where they don't really have the passer back there that can, dice up your secondary. It was going to be how they were going to need to run on you. And that was the 1 game you had last year where we actually did a good job of stopping the run. And then you had the Chargers, who absolutely were down Keenan Allen. They lost Mike Williams halfway into the game. They were down their starting left tackle. You weren't getting them at the full height of their powers on that particular day. I'd be maybe the only one I'd give a little bit of legitimacy to would be the Chargers one from that 4-game stretch. But it's rare that there's not a team that knows how to attack this defense now. It's getting ever rarer. It's getting ever rarer. I don't think that the Lions are not going to, as you saw last year, they're not going to overthink it. They scored how many points against us last year, Brendan? What was it, 41, 43 last season?
Something like that, yeah. And Ben Johnson's one of the best offensive coordinators in the league. If he gets this wrong, that would be shocking.
It would be to me too. A guy that a lot of people are talking about as a future head coach in this league right now. So I would be blown away if that was the case as well. But who knows, man? Carroll's done some surprising things. Maybe he's just in there running through chalkboards again like he did before the Denver game last year, punching holes in walls. And it's like, damn, coach can get this angry? Maybe that lights a fire at that point. But well said, Upo. Thank you for that $10 donation. And Corey's thinking right along the same lines I am with this comment. Thank you, Corey, for the $2 donation. He says they look like they didn't even want to be out there. Kind of the surprising. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, again, I'm not really interested in going after any players right now. I'm not, but I can say there was maybe a little bit of a lack of fire. There was a little bit of it looked like a walkthrough at times more than a game. There was a little bit of half-speed stuff going on. Like, I hate to be that guy, but I could have sworn that Bobby Wagner jogged to Cam Akers on that 4th down touchdown. I don't like to call him out for nothing because he's my favorite player. But I could have he was probably exhausted because the defense had been on the field for 8 years. But I could have sworn he was jogging on that 4th down.
Yeah, I'll say that's fair. By the end of the game, he's probably pretty wore down. And the offense, which we'll have to talk about soon here, was kind of non-functional throughout that first half. So it just got even worse. This was an issue for me, Corey, coming out of this game on top of a couple of other issues. I am disappointed that the team's not adjusting their coverage schemes, but I'm not terribly surprised because they've not shown a whole hell of a want or willingness to change schemes in recent years past. That shouldn't be too much of a shocker for me. What is a shocker for me is that even when we had bad defenses in recent years, even when we had those times where we're giving up large swaths of yards, the players played hard for Coach Carroll. They played hard for him. And today I saw a game in which I actually found myself going, I don't see guys playing hard all across the board. And that's the part to me that was the shocking, surprising part. I've always thought Carroll's a great motivator. That's one of the things that seems to be more of an unfailing part of who he is. He might get beat on X's and O's and like a chess match, but he's absolutely going to have his team fiery and ready to go. This is why we've had so much success in 10 a.m. games as of recent, is that he's got that in his wheelhouse. That's something that you can rely upon with Coach Carroll. But indeed, this last week, Corey, I saw the same thing, which was that they weren't to full on lifeless in their look, but they certainly, maybe to say they didn't want to be out there or that they were going through the motions, like you said, definitely appeared to be that way for me too, Brendan.
Yeah, I agree.
And strangely so.
Yeah,
Corey.
but when it's everybody, it's hard to get mad at the players. Like if it's everybody or almost everybody, then it's a coaching problem. You didn't get the team ready. It's the coaching's fault.
That's where we do come back to again, as you said before, this is really a game coming out of it that's coaching problem more than it is a talent problem, more than it's a player problem. This is a coaching problem all the way down the line a little bit as it stands. Thank you, though, Corey. Nupo, thank you for the double donation. Appreciate the $5 as well. He says, run 5 yards and cut or hook to an open zone. Debo, CMC, Kittle, and Ayuk are going to kill us if we don't fix this. That's it, man. I mean, what's weird is you can run a couple of different things that'll be open. You can run a hook route, a stop route. You can run an over route. You can run an out route. The corner, especially if you're throwing to the outside, the corner is going to be dropping into bail technique. And there's so many snaps I saw of this last week, Brendan, where you're playing 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 yards of off coverage, prior to the snap. And then post snap, you flip your hips and you drop with another 3 yards of bail technique to depth. It makes it very hard for that corner to come rally up. Then you're sending him so far behind the 8 ball to start things off to protect against a deep ball that often isn't even going there. Nobody even throws 9 routes against us really anymore. And you're taking him out of the play essentially to come up and make a play on those hooks and those curls and whatnot. And Coach Carroll, within the spectrum of his defense, relies on the fact that, well, they'll eventually try to throw that 9 route. Well, there'll eventually be a misthrown ball or a tip ball and one of those curl routes coming up front. And then we can take advantage of that moment. But those kind of situations haven't happened as much anymore. Guys are just able to make those short routes work. Offenses in the NFL, to me, Brendan, have just gotten more efficient about making the short game work, getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands into a playmaker in space and letting him go do the damage up the field rather than dropping back, looking down the field, and having to throw a 15-yard post route. And I think that's what's made this hard for Coach Carroll's defense to kind of hold on here, is it's built to stop those routes that offenses aren't running as much. Is that fair to put it in that way?
Yeah. I mean, even if the scheme was good, even if the stuff was good, teams have been playing against it for so long now. They should have figured it out. Like, even if it was good, people would have figured it out by now just because it's been there for so long. So the fact that it's bad is like the problem's even bigger.
Yeah. And it's only growing. It's kind of metastasizing a little bit. I don't think it's going to go away unless they start to make some real true hardy adjustments down the line. But I'm glad the Niner game is far off at this point, Upo, because if they were on the horizon in the next couple of games after the game that they put out against the Steelers this last week, that'd probably be a pretty brutal game. We got to hope that maybe they get an injury or two, or they can kind of fall back down to earth at some point this season, or, Purdy finally turns into a potato. I don't know. Something happens. Because if we got to play him straight up, I'm not liking our chances right now.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you, Upo. Appreciate the $5, man. Dr. G, thank you for the $10 donation. Y'all make the hard pill a little easier to swallow. Oh, man. Thank you so much, Dr. G. I appreciate that. We're covering some tough terrain here, and this is a place Brendan's well aware of this from his standpoint, I know as well, which is that, there's a lot of fans out there that bristle when we do this content creation game and having to talk about negative things, and they will get mad and they'll get frustrated and they'll get up in arms. I think we both like to think and believe that our fan bases understand what we're trying to do here when we do these channels, and that we're not doing anybody any favors if we're lying to you guys. And if we're covering something up in the name of being homers, we love this team. We root for this team. We want to see this team do great things. But That doesn't mean that we just have to give them a pat on the back at every turn and say, it'll be okay, buddy. You'll get it next week, especially when it's something that we don't think is likely that they're going to be able to go get next week, because they're not going to have a fix necessarily for the issue. But I'm glad to hear that we can make that pill a little easier to swallow. And there is still hope. It is still one game. We'll see if they can kind of turn this around, make an adjustment, see what Coach Carroll, maybe a little bit of where they say desperation is the thing of all ingenuity or something. What is it?
Yeah.
This has got some phrase like that. I don't know. Apply that here, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, something like that. I get the general spirit behind that. The crazy thing is, though, we gave up the deep ball in that game several times.
And we did
too. Like you can't even say, oh, we took away the deep ball, but we gave up everything underneath. No, we gave up multiple deep shots, and you had that play where Tariq Woolen gets burned by Puka Nacua, and Stafford just overthrows him. Like, even that didn't work. Yeah. So you can't find any element of this game plan except for stopping the run, which is worthless in the modern NFL, or worth a lot less than it used to be, at least.
Yeah.
That actually worked. That's the thing that's crazy. Most games you could at least say, hey, we didn't give up anything over the top. No, this game you gave up stuff over the top.
Well, that's also been one of you've heard this from me before in saying that, it's the great irony within Coach Carroll's defense is that he ends up giving up big plays in the passing game. It's just not on 9 routes. So you have a crosser, a deep crosser being run, and Quandre Diggs just doesn't pick him up on the one deep ball that was on the one side. And then we have one of our few moments in the game where Seahawks are running man, and they run into each other at the line of scrimmage on a switch release route. And the guy gets wide open off of the 2 players colliding with each other because they can't get about it, which was just emblematic of the day. I mean, that was like a perfect snapshot for what you were doing in coverage throughout the day. But in fact, they think they ran into each other earlier in the game too. There was another play down on the other side of the field where they did the same kind of thing. So, yeah, you couldn't stop much of anything, but that's also why if I was talking to Coach Carroll, I'd say, look, I know that you want to prevent against the big play, but go look at the data. Go look at your team. You don't give up 9 routes. But if you look at it, there's a lot of chunk thrown plays in games you played over the past couple of years. It still has been an element and part of your defense within there. So you're not really stopping it. So if you're not stopping it with this protectionism type of application for your secondary play, why not dump some of that? Why not bail on some of that and try, something out new as far as concepts go? Yeah. You think it'd be an easy sell to him because it would be pretty stark, the data, if he took a look at it. It stood out to me. That 2020 season, they were throwing all over us, all over the field, and we're dropping in cover 3 and cover 2 and can't stop anything deep. Jamal got beat 4 or 5 times alone that year on his own.
Easily.
But thank you, Dr. G. Appreciate that kind comment in there, man. I'm glad to hear that is the case too as well. Hope you're having a great night. Cameron, thank you for the $5 donation. Says, if Witherspoon plays this week and we are still running zone coverage, I'm going to give up on Pete. I can't believe week 2 is now a must win.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that, doesn't it? It feels like that.
Does. Yeah, I mean as much as a week 2 game can.
You're going to have to do a lot of work. Like even that doesn't really cover up the stink of how bad that week 1 was. You're going to have to, if you want to really undo that loss, you're going to have to do something like beat the Bengals, beat the Eagles, beat the 49ers. Like what you're going to have to do to mask the stench of that week 1 is very, very unlikely to happen. I'm just going to say it. I'm sorry, but it's not likely that you go into Cincinnati and win, but that's what you're going to have to do to make up for this. That's the problem that I have with it. Yeah, it's just one game, but it's a game that you will be chasing the rest of the season. And I still believe that in 2 months, we're going to look at the Rams. They're going to be like 1-8. And then everybody's going to be like, who did they beat? Oh yeah, that's right.
They stomped on Seattle at home.
That's weird. How did that happen? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that won't be the case, but I suspect that it will be. And that just makes it worse.
It certainly does. I think you're right about the fact that this is not a game that just if they get suddenly right in this game, it means everything's been corrected and fixed. I mean, that team just coming off a terribly embarrassing loss here at home. Everyone, including me and Brendan and a lot of other people out in the Seattle area, are going to be kind of calling them out a little bit on that performance. And I would guess that the players are going to be very sensitive to answering that bell, at least this coming week, as far as their energy level goes and giving more of that effort. That doesn't mean that that'll cover up the schematic deficiencies, but it does mean you'll see better effort, which was a glaring piece that was kind of missing. Does that mean that they're going to keep that effort then into week 3, 4, 5? If it had been dropped off week 1, again, this is one of those, well, we'll just have to see if it is indeed going to be the case on that. So, I don't know. We'll have to see, but I do agree. Cameron does kind of feel almost must-winish if you get into an 0-2 state, especially if it's another win where offensively they're able to do whatever they want to do, and offensively you're struggling to kind of find your feet. You're going, boy, this is going to be a long year. It's going to be a long year. I don't understand why they would run Witherspoon in zone, but you're right to worry about it, Cameron, because this has been a team that has shown you in times in the past that they can take a man-based coverage guy and turn him into a zone coverage guy. That has been a way that they've gone about it. Jamal Adams being the glaring example of that in recent history. So I hope they don't. I hope they would understand in taking this guy, you're grabbing him for his man-based abilities. If you put him out in zone, he's not going to be comfortable in that realm. He's going to get beat in that realm. He's going to look every bit as bad as Kobe Bryant, or if you play him on the outside, as bad as Mike Jackson or Trey Brown. Certainly not better than those guys at that point. He's got to be put in a man-based coverage situations. That's what he did. That's why you drafted him. If the Lions had him on their team, they were going to pick him at 6. If they had him on their team, they'd have him start him on the outside, and they would have him start in man-based situations.
Right.
Thank you, though, Cameron. Appreciate that donation, brother. Hope you're having a good night. Feed me more Legos. Thank you for the $5 donation. Our teams lost their cool towards the end. Our team lost their cool towards the end. Diggs and Metcalf got unsportsmanlike, and their captains. That has to change. What did Diggs get called on unsportsmanlike conduct?
Unnecessary roughness.
Oh, what did he do?
I can't remember exactly. I'll be honest. I kind of started prepping the post-game video by that point. It was like around the 2-minute warning. It is weird that Diggs would do that. That's not like Diggs. Diggs is a veteran. He should not be doing stuff like that. I'm not going to make a bigger deal out of it than it needs to be made, but it's, I mean, if this keeps up, then there is going to be some of the classic inmates running the asylum talk here. Like the coach just has lost control of his players.
Well, and this is it's one of those things too. It's, we had the guys come through during that LOB period that were all, we're hearing some of the wild stories from coming out of KJ and right with his show and him telling us about how there were with the relationships and what was going on in that locker room and on the practice field. And, Coach Carroll, this is a little bit of the price of doing business if you're going to have him here as your head coach. I have a lot of people that I'm sure you hear about it too, Brendan, a little bit about this team needs to be more disciplined. This team needs to be more disciplined. Now, we led the league in penalties during the Super Bowl year. Coach Carroll is not a disciplinarian. That's not his bag. He is a California surfer dude, cool, laid back guy. Like, that's kind of when it comes to like the discipline aspect of things, that's always been kind of his way. So to expect now that you're going to get him on with players and disciplining them and putting him, it's just probably not going to happen. Like we're talking about the coverage, it's not likely to change at this point when that's so thoroughly been who he is and his identity as a coach. And he does so purposefully because he believes it also allows those players to be who they are. And if he allows them to be who they are, then he'll get the best out of them on the football field. And to his credit, that is a strategy that has worked during that LOB period. We had a lot of unruly personalities and boisterous guys, and it was probably tough to manage. So I get the frustration on it, but I guess for me, feed more Legos, kind of like what I had said on my Sunday in regards to this Metcalf thing. First off, in regards to the Metcalf unsportsmanlike conducts that he's gotten, the penalties he's gotten, which has been since he's been in the league, what has he gotten, Brendan? 7, 8, maybe something like that.
Most in the league, 8.
8. Okay. So he's had 8 over a 4-year career. So twice a year on average, right? Is that right? My math
yeah, but yes, but it's definitely been slanted more towards the second half of his career, right? The first half of his career, he was actually really good at getting the other team to commit the penalty.
That was going to be that. Let's boil this really down, shall we? He's been called 8 times for it. So 8 times 15 is 120 yards of penalty yardage given up by DK Metcalf over a 4-year period due to his personal conduct, pal. But like you said, there's also the flip side of that where he has caused penalty flags going through this same rigmarole of them having the chippy, getting talking, the other guy hitting him in the face, the flag getting called. I would estimate that there's at least 4 PI penalties that he's gotten on the other side of it. So what we're really turning this over, what we're really getting mad about as far as a bottom line net, not gross, but net, is 4 penalties over a 4-year period.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get worked up over that. Not when there's so many other bigger problems on this team. It's an issue. It's something I'd like to see him tamper down, but it's just not, to me, what is really at the forefront from so many other angles for us to look at and correct and fix. And that's why I just can't get too worked up about it.
Yeah, and you know, I've been around long enough to see a lot of diva receivers, right? Plenty of them.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Plenty
yeah.
of them. And you compare what DK's doing to what you see from these others, it's very different. It doesn't feel like the same thing at all. Like you know, T.O. is the classic example. And some people in the chat, this was a long time ago. It might you guys might not remember some of the stuff that T.O. used to do when he decided, I don't like what's going on right now. I'm gonna call my starting quarterback gay to force the team to get rid of me, or I'm gonna start doing sit-ups in my driveway with the cameras all on me, trying to, you know, I'm gonna read the fakest apology ever to my quarterback for accusing him of getting tired in the Super Bowl and blowing it. And you know, the stuff that he did, it was very conniving and very calculated as to like, I want out of here. I'm gonna say whatever the hell I need to say and do whatever I need to do to get out of here.
Yeah.
We're not seeing anything like that from Metcalf. And even somebody like Des Bryant. I remember plays back in like the first 5-6 years of Des Bryant's career where he would get so mad he would start fighting with his own teammates on the sideline.
Yeah.
I remember like Jason Witten trying to come over and calm down, and he just spins around like, I'll fight you. I'll fight every last on this team. It's just like, dude, like we're not seeing that from Metcalf. So it's a problem, but diva wide receivers go around. Diva wide receivers have been all over the place. DK is one of the probably the softer examples of one. We are getting off easy compared to the other diva receiver experiences we've seen.
Well said. I don't think the comparison to that aforementioned players is fit. And it's not to say there isn't, we wouldn't like to see it cleaned up. I get that people would, but it's just, I don't think as big an issue as for much as it gets talked about, Brendan, and I've heard a lot about it in regards to DK, it's nowhere near an issue. And I wish some of these other things got talked about as much as some people bring that stuff up with, not you here for it, Pete, because I get it, but just that we concentrate on these other things that I think are just, if we fix these things, this thing won't even be a bump in our road. You know, it's a bump in the road because these things are being bad over here. And then this is bad in addition to it. So everything just seems much worse, but I don't think it would be as poor if we had some other things kind of cleaned up here that are the real problems at play.
Mm-hmm.
But feed me. Thank you for the $5 donation, man. And I do believe too, Metcalf's not a captain. I think just Diggs is a captain, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't think Metcalf would be a captain. Like that would, he's
No.
not really, I mean, you know, no disrespect to DK Metcalf, one of my favorite players on this team right now, but he's not really captain material. He's a player.
Yeah, I don't know if that's as much a fit for him, and it suits him. Some guys it just doesn't suit. That's all good. But feed me. Thank you for that donation, man. I appreciate you on that. Connor Oswagler with another dono as well. Thank you for the $10 drop, Connor. Says Woolen got beat by Nuka and couldn't catch up on a rep. Let it be said he's probably still getting conditioning back and played 80 snaps before, but is there a concern he lost a step post injury?
We'll come back to it if it keeps happening. Right now, I haven't really considered that angle. I think it was just a bad rep.
Yeah, I haven't in my life, Connor, heard of any player ever reference the fact that after they got arthroscopic surgery, that they were then lesser speedy, lesser fast, lesser quick. I've heard players say after the broken leg, I wasn't the same. After the torn ACL, I wasn't the same. After the Achilles tear, I wasn't the same. Arthroscopic surgery, I think, is a little bit different. And so I don't believe that that's probably going to be the case here with Tariq Woolen. I would estimate, as you touch on at the head of this, he didn't play at all in training camp, really, up until right at the end, and they were bringing him along, I'm sure, slowly at the end. He didn't get any games that he played. I don't think he played at all in any of the games in preseason. So, him being a little bit, not on every detail of things to start things out, I can understand a little bit more considering he was out for as long action as he was. But as Brendan says, we'll monitor it and pay attention to it. He also made a play in the back of the end zone where he showed off some quickness and speed to knock a ball away. So he did kind of flash in that moment to me, but we'll just have to kind of watch it. I think he should be okay though, Connor. Just haven't ever heard of the arthroscopic, such as a very minor surgery compared to any of those others on the scale that should be okay.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it yet. We'll revisit this in a few weeks if it keeps happening. But honestly, he was probably, and this is kind of sad to have to say it, if you do want to talk about players, he was probably our second best player on defense in that game.
I put him as third. I'd have Uchenna, Bobby, and him would be to me.
I actually, I don't know. Maybe I'm going too far with it. The guy who actually stood out to me really positively was Jordan Brooks. I was amazed at how good he looked for being 8.5 months removed from an ACL. I was like, wow, he can actually play. I thought he played better than he played in most games last year when he was fully healthy. Maybe it's just grading on a curve because I have low expectations for Brooks, but I was like, wow, that guy can actually. That guy even made a couple of nice plays in coverage. I can't believe it.
It might be fair. I mean, I certainly think that he looked better in coverage than he has in the past, and his grade represented that. You know, he came out of it with a 56 grade almost as far as his coverage score goes, where he's been a guy down like the 30s at times, you know, coming out of games. I guess he looked okay to me. I mean, I did see him give up a couple. He did give up like the one zipper route on coverage to the tight end where he was close, but he gave up the catch. And I did think, and especially, and to me, Brendan, some of this is a little bit informed by that. I'm putting this Bobby video together. I'm putting the all 22 cut ups of this run game. And there's some times where it's like, you go on a run game. I'm going to show this in the video where I go, here's a snap. Here's Bobby taking on the second level block. Guys gone in an instant. And as I'm showing you that, I then pan over and I can show you Jordan Brooks on the very same play getting locked up. And there's a lot of this on the tape that you see as far as the difference between those two guys. And this is really where that whole speed thing comes into play for me and becomes a little bit of a null void argument for me, because you got a guy in Jordan Brooks who's one of the fastest linebackers in the sport, but the instincts are not there. And you have a guy in Bobby Wagner who's vastly slower than him at this point in time in his career, but is so ahead of it and so on it, much more ahead of Jordan Brooks. Let me give you one play that's a specific one on this. It will be at the first cut up I show of the video I do. Matt Stafford comes up to the line of scrimmage. Jordan, you got Bobby Wagner over as on the strong side of the offensive formation to Stafford's right. Jordan Brooks is over on the left-hand side here. Stafford goes to his head and changes the call. Bobby waits for a second and he's watching, and then Bobby goes, yep, he changed something. Bobby comes over 3 yards into the A gap from way over here all the way into the A gap. Now, at the same time he does that, Jordan Brooks takes 2 steps away from the line of scrimmage towards over here. And Bobby shoots the gap and makes the play. Jordan's nowhere there to make the play. And it's just the representations I've had of Jordan Brooks in the past of can't get on a block, can't get off a block to save his life was again a little bit on display. Your point's right. I'm not trying to tear your point down, Brendan, by the way. It might sound like I am, but I'm not. It's just can't get off the blocks and the instincts. The two things that you sometimes really look just aren't always there with them, even at this point in time in his career a little bit. I think he had a little bit of a better game, but there's still some things where you go, man, it's still not quite in it on all the details, you know?
Yeah, he'll never be an elite linebacker. I think we've learned that. But I was really worried about Brooks playing in this game. I thought it was going to look really bad. It would look like, remember Radigan or BBK in the preseason where looked like they had one leg? Yeah. I thought it was going to look like that. It didn't at all. So I don't know. I was actually pretty happy with the way Brooks played.
Let me ask you.
The only happy surprise from that game on defense.
So we had Devin Bush in this game as well. And Devin Bush, by his PFF grade, outperformed Jordan Brooks in this game. Mm-hmm. He was our 4th highest rated defender on 21 total snaps.
Yeah. It's a very depressing list, by the way. I did look at it.
It's not exciting.
Yeah. I think the highest grade is like what, a 62? What was it?
No. You got a 75.6.
Really? Okay. I was just looking at the coverage numbers. That's
you're at the coverage. The coverage numbers were you're concentrating on the worst part of the defense. But no, Chenna was 75, Bobby was 74, and Mario Edwards 68, and then Devin Bush 67.
Okay. I was looking. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I mean, I still would like to see this defense with more Devin Bush because I liked what I saw from him in the preseason. But Brooks did play well enough to where I got it. I understood why he's out there. I at some point, I want to see what Devin Bush can do, and I'm hoping he gets that opportunity. But I think he did blow one tackle in this game where he had a guy in the backfield that just kind of let him go, weird-looking play. So I can understand that it wasn't something that was infuriating me, the decision to play Brooks more than Bush.
I'm not passionate about it. That's for sure. This is more of kind of a side eye thing where I just more wonder with it. Like, would it be better out there with potentially Bush? But it's something. Let's see what Jordan does through the year. And maybe he's going to was his first game back. He's just getting back to snuff. So, wouldn't expect him to be much like I'm going to give the rope to Tariq Woolen here in that I got to give a little bit of the room there to Jordan Brooks in the same respect. He didn't play at all in the preseason or in training camp. So you got to give him some time to, bounce on back. Let's turn this
Yeah.
over a little bit, shall we? We haven't talked at all about the offense, and rightfully so. We needed to turn over this defense in this fashion and get to the depths of this a little bit.
Yeah.
Offense comes out, Brendan. They start out nice. They're
Yeah.
scoring on each drive or getting themselves in a position to score on every drive. They're moving the ball. They're looking very close to what they looked like through the first part of the 12 games last year. It was kind of weird, Brendan. It was like the game was a microcosm for last season's offense, the first half to the second half. Whereas the first half of the year, you're great. And the second half of the year, offensively, you just fall off a freaking cliff. Can you explain to me what the hell happened to the offense in this game?
I mean, I think this is pretty academic. I think this is pretty elementary. The offense was playing great, and then we lost both of our tackles, and we couldn't do anything. We clearly had no plan for how to deal with losing both of your tackles. And let me be very clear, I'm not really throwing shade at anybody when I say that. I think most teams, if they lost both of their tackles in the middle of a game, would have problems. I don't know if they would have problems like we did, but they would have big problems. That's like you tell any head coach, hey, coming out early in the third quarter, you're going to lose your left tackle and your right tackle back to back. They would definitely, I think they would acknowledge that would be really hard to overcome. So I have some sympathy over there. It wasn't a good game by the offense, of course. There's no universe where 3 yards in the second half or 12 yards or whatever it was is good.
Mm-hmm.
But I get it. And that first half, I really liked what I saw. I thought the play calling was great. There was a lot of creativity. We ran that one trick play. It didn't really work, but it was still a productive play. There were a lot of plays where we had like tight ends lining up in the backfield. We had 2 tight ends lining up in the backfield. It felt like we could get what we needed. It was pretty strong. I came away from that first half feeling like the offense was definitely on the right track. Play calling lost me a little bit in that second half, a little bit, like that one play on 3rd and 4 when we took the deep shot to Metcalf. I think 3 receivers were running basically a 9 route on that play on 3rd and 4 when you desperately need to stay on the field. I don't understand that. But even on that play, by the way, JSN did get open. JSN was open for the first down, and Gino never saw him. So there's a little bit of that. I thought Walker played a good game. Ed played good as he could. Eventually, at some point, you can't give him the ball anymore because you're down too much.
Mm-hmm.
Walker was good. The offensive line was okay when they were healthy and then abysmal when they weren't. Again, I get it. I don't have a huge problem with it. I thought Metcalf was playing good until the end when he lost his mind. After the game was over, I want to continue to stress that. The game was over because I know some people are going to try to say he cost us this game. He did not.
Right.
So I'm not really that upset about the offense. It's not great. It's got some stuff to work on. I like the fact that Gino took accountability in the post-game press conference in a situation where I don't even really feel like he did anything that bad. He missed a couple of plays, but it's the typical stuff you see in a game. And if they can get healthy or at least get some serviceable players out there better than Stone Forsythe, then I think good things can still happen. And I'm not too down on those guys.
Yeah, I thought your thoughts are pretty much in close alignment to where I would be at with it on this game. It does get hard at the point, just to reinforce what you said on this. When you're talking about the 2 tackles gone, I can't think of any offense in my recent history of watching football, not just Seahawks, but just watching NFL games, of a team losing 2 tackles, which is very rare in a game to have happen anyway, be down the 2 tackles and still have a functioning offense. I cannot think of one time or one example of that ever occurring at that point. So it doesn't make it hard for me then at that point to be too hard on the offense in the second half troubles, because just not any offenses I think in the NFL are going to be functional in that state. I am a little bit, I think, down a little bit more on the Gino. Not that he was the reason you lost, or he was good enough and he was good early on and he had some nice throws there, but there was some misses. You mentioned the trick play. He had Jake Bobo wide open and he's staring at Jake Bobo, and the defender's got his back turned to Bobo down the football field. He's wide open there. You've got to make that throw on that play if you're Gino. You're looking right at him. And there was a little bit of a risk-adverse nature to Geno Smith in the way he played in this game. Let's take a little bit of the Tyler Lockett throw down into the end zone, where Lockett's actually, I went back and watched this on the L22. Lockett's actually open down there. And what Gino did was the same thing he did on the DK throw, because what's pissed me off as well on that 3rd and 4, Brendan, is not only did you throw it deep, you threw it out of bounds 10 yards.
Yeah, you didn't even give him a chance.
You got a 6'4" receiver put it up on the guy and let him go try to at least make a play. I know that's not DK's like bread and butter, but it sure in the hell beats throwing it 10 yards out of bounds when you're not going to have another play and you're going to punt after you don't get it. So I saw the same thing on the Tyler throw. Tyler's open, but rather than putting it in the back of the end zone, a spot where Tyler can go get it, he whistles it out of bounds 5 yards to where Tyler doesn't have any sort of chance to make any play. So Geno's got to, I know he's trying to probably like lower down the turnover worthy throws and eliminate that from his game. But part of also what made him great last year was making those go for it throws. And you needed that in this game at times, him to make a couple of those throws in the moments when he had the opportunity to do so. And he just didn't quite pull the trigger in those moments in the way. I just felt a little bit like he was kind of being, not that he played a bad game, but just in those moments where he's trying to, maybe it's Carroll, just be protective, don't get a turnover here, but you got to let him make those throws. You got these targets down the football field you want to attack. You got to be willing to let Geno open it up, let it loose, get this on the open road, put that pedal down the middle and let's go. The offense is going to run this thing,
Yeah. I felt like the bad Geno plays were the bad plays that you will see in most games from most good quarterbacks. There wasn't anything super alarming like, oh, he's chucking it into triple coverage. He's just throwing it up there into it, like the Zach Wilson interception last night, where he literally throws it right to the linebacker. There wasn't anything like that. It's just the typical stuff that a good, not super elite quarterback will do that he needs to work on. And it was good. Again, like I said, in the post-game press conference, he owned it, which I appreciated because that's kind of a, something that's you didn't hear that all that often previously, of course.
Yeah,
like
very true.
Just very direct way he says it. He just says, I did it. I got to get better. I'm not putting this on the backup tackles. That had nothing to do with it. Even though we all know that it had a lot of things to do with it, he doesn't need to be talking about that. That's the whole point of this. Like, you don't need to talk about what other people are doing. Worry about what you're doing. That's how you play this. That's how you play this game.
It's a great point, man. And I'm giving him a hard time here, but the thing that has always impressed me about Geno since he's come aboard continues to impress me about Geno now. And frankly, it's part of what gives me confidence that this is just not it's going to skim the pond of what his performance this year. He's going to be just fine when it's all said and done. But that is that he is truly a leader. And he operates from the leadership standpoint, the quarterback position, in the way you need and the way that you really want, but not in the way that all quarterbacks do, especially in this modern age. And I think that wasn't as much a part of that here that we've seen in the past. There was always excuses before. He doesn't make excuses. He owns it. He said, we're going to get better. I'm going to improve. I got to get better. And I love that about him. And I'm still very happy he is our quarterback. He's going to be just fine this year, I think, when it's all said and done, settled, when he doesn't have backup tackles in the 24/7. But it was just what it was, I think, in this first performance with him. Kenneth Walker, is he going to be a top 5 back this year in the NFL, would you say? Does he, if you're not by production, by performance?
Okay, let me think here. Bijan. Got Bijan. I'm not feeling Saquon. Not feeling Tony Pollard. Not really anyway.
Chubb.
Nobody. Okay, Chubb. There's another good one. Not going to be anybody on the Eagles. Not going to be anybody on Washington. Not going to be. I'd say he should be. Should be.
He looks like it to me. I mean, he certainly had a lot of those runs where you even on inside runs, the ability to bounce it out there and get wide. It's almost like a Madden deal, in Madden where you get the ball and it's an inside run, and then you have the quick back who can, you just get him to the outside because he can be faster laterally to get to the outside, and he gets a 5-6 yard gain as those defenders come over there and rally in the game. Kind of the same thing in some of these runs that he showed off in this game. I got to give the Waldron some props in this game on that angle of it, Brendan. We got some more outside runs in this game. We got some pitch plays. We got some work in the lateral edges, which is something that we've been begging for in recent years. And you got a 5.3 yard per carry average on the back of doing it. So let's continue to do more of that. Continue to do more of getting the edges, less of the A-gap runs over and over again, because there's success to be had on the back of, going in that direction with it.
Yeah, I have some good feelings about that, at least. Was he our best player overall in that game? It was
probably, yeah, I would probably say that he was the most, I think, impressive. It wasn't a lot of impressive performances.
Either him or Dixon. Honestly, Dixon had a really good game.
We got to start smacking some of these guys up the head with the guys on the down punts for Dixon. I don't know if he's just pissed those guys off or what, but those guys they get within. The ball drops at the 6. The guy is running up to it. All he's got to do is just knock the ball back into play. And all of these guys I've watched, it seems like this last 5 times he's knocked the ball down there over the last couple of years, the guys grab it and slide on into the end zone. And I know it's hard and it's but just, It doesn't matter if you knock it back and it goes to the 3, but just don't have to do this. I got to grab it and get my hands on it. And, and it happened to him again in this game where he just knocked a beautiful punt. It was going to be right down the 1, and the player just couldn't get his feet to get the ball in bounds.
Mm-hmm.
But the Dixon continues to look really good. Myers, okay, missed the 1 kick. Is what it is on that one, I guess.
I guess. I mean, that field goal kind of flipped the whole game, honestly. Him missing that field goal, the Rams go down in like 2 seconds and kick a long field goal that misses. Rams get the ball at the start of the half, they get the touchdown, and the whole game is just like it felt like that missed field goal changed momentum in a very negative way. I'm not going to say it's the reason why we lost, but
no, and momentum was a part, but that's incredibly true here. The momentum was a thing you could feel. As soon as you got into that second half, you're like, man, the momentum's just not there right now with this team. We got no juice. We got no momentum, and football is absolutely a sport about momentum. And if you don't have it, you can feel it. So I think that is a, completely valid point. Kind of would have liked to have seen them on that attempt, Brendan, to kind of do a little bit of let's step on their throat here. Let's put this team away early. Let's not just be happy and satisfied with trying 50-yard field goal attempts. Let's go get the touchdown. Kind of hope that Carroll gets a little bit more ballsy at times in that respect. He doesn't have to go for hell for broke. You don't have to be Dan Campbell going for fake punts on your own 13-yard line here. But we got a really explosive offense. You got Jackson Smith-Njigba now on this team as a slot guy. If it's a 4th and 4, I'm going to trust him to get open on the 3rd cornerback. I want us to try to maybe lean into that a little bit more at times this year, rather than just being happy and satisfied with just a field goal.
Yeah, absolutely. That's if there's anything you can really criticize the offense for in this game, it would be maybe if you score touchdowns instead of kicking field goals in that first half, you have such a big lead, you can survive that second half. It's possible.
It is.
I look, just because one side of the ball plays bad doesn't mean the other side of the ball has an excuse to be bad too. Like you can have a situation where you go, okay, I got to pick up some slack here, and I'll do it. I'll be the ones that carry.
That's right. It should, in a lot of ideal ways. Football in a given season is going to have it go ebb and flow, where some weeks your offense will have to carry that load, some weeks the defense will have to carry the load. So it is a part of football where that is a bit of a requirement. You can't just require it and say, well, the defense has to play good for us to be able to show out. It's not going to play out that way. Alan A., thank you for the $5 donation. I do appreciate it, Alan. He says, the B&B show is always lit. He says, getting a lot of love from Rams and 49er fans. 100. Go Hawks. Oh, we got some Niner fans and Ram fans giving us some love in here?
Oh, constantly. Oh,
let's go.
It's been dominating the chat the whole night.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's okay. I have ads on. I don't care. They can come in here.
Hey, everyone's welcome in here, and especially if you're going to keep it kind and keep it nice and all that. And appreciate you guys. Thank you, Alan. That's good to hear. The Niner fans and Ram fans are giving some love out there. They know not to kick us when we're down, man. That's all. They just know they're not looking to kick us when we're down. Appreciate you, Alan. Appreciate the kind comments as well, brother. Feed Me Legos. Appreciate the $2 donation. Says, will we ever get better with the screen game? We tried a screen in this game. We tried a traditional screen in this game, Brendan.
Yeah, I mean, I guess not, right? I guess the answer is no.
They supposedly worked on it, Feed Me more Legos all throughout training camp. So it was a big point of emphasis. The one time they run the screen in this game, it was unbelievable to me. I was like, the Rams were all over it. It was like the Rams knew it was coming, and we never run a screen game. So were we showing things pre-snap as an indicator? I don't know, but the Rams absolutely snuffed the whole thing out. It was dead on arrival. I don't know why. But they did try to work out on training camp, so I can't knock the team for it. You've tried to get better at it, even if you're not getting better out of it. I would like to see, and maybe we're going to have to wait till Eskridge gets back, but I would like to see a little bit more of the bubble screen game utilized. That does remain a part of the game that they don't really feature at all.
Do you feel like we're giving it away pre-snap? Because it feels like when we run it, teams know it's coming, and they just run in there with their hair on fire because they know that's where the ball's going.
Yeah, I think it stood out to me, especially in this game, because you have McVay on the other side. And McVay's whole thing, the whole deal with McVay, when you really boil down to what is his special thing? His special thing is that he's going to run out the same offensive formation over and over again at you, but he's going to run every kind of different variation out of it. And you don't know what you're going to get prior to the snap because everything looks the same. The way the linemen lineup is the same. You can't do that whole thing where if you look at their knuckles and it's white, it's going to be a run game. But if it's not white because their fingers aren't pressing down, then they're in pass protection. There was that whole thing for many years in that.
Yeah.
They're very much taught on the finer details of how to make everything always look the same every snap. And so the defense is always guessing. They don't ever know what they're seeing. But yes, I'm seeing the same thing where when you see our offense, it does appear at times like the defense kind of knows what's coming between it being a run or being a pass. And I don't know why exactly, but I'm guessing somebody's probably showing something on the line. One of your linemen's probably giving an indicator away, and the opposition's aware of it and has been aware of it, even going maybe back to last year on that.
Yeah, if that's the case, it's really bad that your coaches can't figure it out and deal with it. Like that's what you're there for. That's really bad.
Wasn't there a thing with Cross last year where he was showing his plays? Somebody had caught on to that.
Betty was doing that like 5 years ago. I don't know about Cross.
I think I'd heard about Cross last year. Somebody had mentioned it about him maybe, and I'll have to go look it maybe up after the stream to see if it is, maybe that's what it is with it. Because there was the whole thing with Trent Williams last year on that too with the Niners, where it's like, if he's in this stance, it's run. If he's in that stance, it's pass. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe. But man, that screen game, Brendan, I just remember watching it going, I was so happy to see the screen, but I'm like, why are all those Rams defenders right on it? Like nobody got upfield. They've been trying to blitz all day. They didn't get upfield to go after Geno. They just went right to the running back. I mean, it was just completely obvious to him as to what we were trying to do there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know what to say about it.
I'm going to say feed, probably not. If they work on it and they're still bad at it, probably not. 283-128. Thank you for the $5 donation. It says Geno Smith was pressured on 50% of the dropbacks without the starting tackles. That's a problem.
Yeah, that tells the story, don't it?
It does tell the story. It's why me and Brendan come back to the point of saying, we'll make an evaluation on him in the first half as much as we can. It gets hard to do in the second half. The Rams started out the second half taking what, Brendan? Didn't they take up like half the third quarter before we finally got the ball on that first drive? Mm-hmm. And then you're almost instantly without your tackles. So you go, well, how do you make any assessments at that point? Because Stone Forsythe and Jay Curran, there's no shocker to me and Brendan. They're not good. We talked about this in the preseason watching them. They're not good. We don't want them in there playing. But this is a little bit of the problem with the modern NFL and the salary cap situation and the 53-man roster is that, it's hard to structure a roster where you're two tackles deep, both at left tackle and right tackle. It is hard. You might get lucky, have one guy that's there or a swing tackle guy, but it's just, you've got your front line guys, you need to be able with the front line. And especially when they're the best parts of your offensive line, as our left tackle and our right tackle are. But it's, if you're without either of your tackles in this game, 283, yeah, I'm going to have a big worry about them being able to get the job done in this game because you need the offense to carry us to some degree. Yeah. I mean, we couldn't punt one time last year to win that football game. If we punted one time, that's a loss for us in that game last season in Detroit.
Exactly.
I
can't imagine anything good coming. I'll say this: I've seen Curhan play decently before. That he played bad in that game, really bad. I've seen Curhan play way better than that. Stone, I haven't.
My issue with it is Hutchinson was a nightmare last week, and now you're going to have Hutchinson on the strong side of the formation to Curhan's side because the Lions will just match him up all day, even if Lucas or they'll match him up, however they want to do it. If it's Curhan in there, they'll match him up. If it's Stone on the other side, they'll put him over there. And I don't think either of those guys can hold up against Aiden Hutchinson. I think, and I know we'll talk about this more in the preview show, but that's where really the big worry for me comes into play is like, how are those guys? You're going to have to chip them all day long. Which means one less back, which means the offense is now kind of restricted, hand tied behind his back a little bit. Waldron's got his work cut out from this week. Defensive coordinator's got his work cut out from this week. It ain't easy against this Lions team that looks like they're likely to, potentially win this division. But it's a problem. You ain't winning any games, 283, if you've got a 50% pressure rate. It doesn't care. No matter how good your defense is or bad at that point. You ain't doing nothing if that's at 50%. But hopefully one or two of those tackles starts, though it doesn't have to be that high. But avert your eyes if they both do. Connor, thank you for the $2 donation. It says, fun fact, Dickinson is number one all-time in yards per punt. It is a fun fact. I did the deep dive on him this year. What do you think about? What do you think about Dickinson? Where's your kind of standing on him?
He's kind of like, it's almost like the punter version of Justin Tucker. Right, where he's just kind of come along here. And I don't know if he'll be recognized as the best punter ever, but he's going to have the numbers of the best punter ever, like how Tucker has the numbers of the best kicker ever. I don't know if the average fan is going to say, oh, yeah, Justin Tucker was the greatest kicker of all time in 10 years. But statistically, he is. Like, people are going to say Vinatieri because he won the 4 Super Bowls. People are going to say I don't know, George Blanda because he was such a icon of the game or something. But I think we all know Tucker's the best kicker ever. And we're also, if this keeps up, going to know that Dixon's the best punter ever.
He's going to have a strong argument for it. I did a bit of a deep dive on Dixon this offseason, Brendan, when he signed that contract extension to see, or not this, when he signed the contract extension, I did a deep dive. And it just stood out to me as, like you say, when you look across the line at the three main markers for a punter that you would gauge, yards, just how far do they kick it? Then, okay, how do they do net? Because you can have a big leg, but if you just outkick your coverage, your big leg is really neutralized at that point because you're going to give up a lot of punt return yardage. And then you got the inside the 20. Those are your three stats. Hang time, I guess, could be the one, but those are the main three stats you'd pay attention to. And Dixon has got high water marks all time in all three of those categories. He's not just your big leg punter. He's also your guy that can really pin it inside the 20 with a great amount of regularity, with as much regularity as any punter in this sport. Brendan's not overstating it. I don't know if he'll ever get to being number one all time as a punter, but he is on a Hall of Fame pace as far as punters can be, and he's got a lot of years left to do to get there. He's very still early in his career, especially punters who can play to like 51 years of age. But he's on track right now as it currently stands with all of those three marks because he's good to great in all of them. And it's outstanding to see him continue to carry it through.
Yeah, I just looked it up. There's one punter in the entire Hall of Fame. I wonder if they just decide to let him be the only one and just leave it.
They very well may be. Because there have been some pretty good punters who've come through that maybe could have a bit of a lay to claim on getting there. So that may be the thing that does prevent him. He'll have to be like insanely good to get in there. You have to have like a 55 net average or something all the time. But Connor, thank you for that donation. And that is a fun fact, man. Dixon's a hell of a punter. Corey, thank you for the $5 donation. Says, we have been so predictable on our defensive looks for a long time. It's a copycat league. Teams have figured us out specifically within our own division.
Yeah.
It's very well said. This is kind of that point I was making a little bit earlier in this show, Corey, saying, you have a defense that came in here and nobody was well-versed in it necessarily. They understood how it worked in its simplified nature, but they didn't know how it would look on the field. You put that defense together. It was a legendary all-time defense, but then you have 10 years of data for teams, 10 years of games, 10 years of 16 games a season and playoff games. And then your coaches going to other places after they'd learned it from Carroll, and then them running the scheme that exact same way. And so now there's 16 more games and 16 more games and you have all these games now for teams to realize, okay, that didn't work against this defense. Okay, that did. Okay, this didn't work. Okay, that did. This over here, yes. That, no. Yes, no. And it refines over time. And as I was saying on this, Chris Sims references a couple of years ago as a friend of Kyle Shanahan, who is well in the know on this. And that is that there's a Seattle beater plays, how to beat Coach Carroll's defense. Here's the Seattle beater plays. And it's not something that was just thrown together last year. It's been refined and take this out, put this in, take this out, put this in over years. And you're absolutely right. The teams within our own division, specifically McVay and Shanahan, have better learned this rule than anybody else in the league. They absolutely know backwards to front how to attack it. And it's on to Carroll at this point to adjust because they know the way.
Honestly, the Niners did not do that well against this defense until last year. There was actually a little bit of a thing where Carroll did well against that Shanahan offense, and then last year it just completely off the rails, and now you can't even say that.
Well, my theory on that, though, then does come back to you ran the 4-3 under with 5 down defensive linemen against the Niners in the prior times. Mm-hmm. And doing that, you would set yourself up from a defensive structure to stop the Shanahan run game. Shanahan can be good in passing. He can take you apart in the passing game and be very creative there. But if he doesn't have the run game first and foremost, his offense becomes limited. Coach Carroll's teams before could always take that run game away because they had the extra 5th defender on the line of scrimmage. And that extra 5th defender spread that line out so that wide zone run that the Niners want to hit with couldn't be as lethal. Now you've gone to the 3-4 defense or the 2-man fronts, and you've just made that wholly more easier. You've taken one more man off the line of scrimmage. You've squeezed the outside linebacker between the defensive tackle space so wide you could drive a truck through it. And now it's much easier for him to attack, much like it was at times with him having some success with the Rams, because we took on the Rams defense. And he's had a lot of his outside zone run works really well on that Rams defense by the way that they're structured in their alignments with their 4-eye techniques, with their defensive ends, right? Where your defensive ends on the inside shoulder of a tackle. Well, if I'm running outside and I have my defensive end naturally aligned to the inside shoulder of an outside tackle, and I want to get outside, that means by my natural alignment, I've lost the leverage game. My leverage is toast, right? Because that tackle's already got me. He just has to come off the line of scrimmage and go like this, and he's got me essentially leveraged out of an outside zone run. So that's why it doesn't work as well with this defense with Carroll to make this go. You had 4-3 before, and you had those guys heads up. You had them right over the top of a man where there was no getting down to the second level easy or clearing out on a pull block. You had to deal with those guys up front. And it's part of why I've harped on him when we play the Niners. Let's just go to the 4-300 in those games.
I wonder if we have the personnel to pull it off. Like some of these guys really are better in a 3-4. That would be my one concern, I guess.
You might not. But then my argument would be back to you on that. Could it be worse than what you did last year against that offense?
Probably not. But I don't know. I'm just trying to find a solution that works here, and
I feel you.
It's tough. It's tough to figure out. But like, what would Nwosu be good in a 4-3? I don't know. That's hard to be sure.
It is. I mean, you're not in a wide 9 technique anymore. You're a little more closer to the line of scrimmage. I mean, that's going to be a little more restrictive for those guys if they're more designed to do that. But, whether they're designed to do it or not, that's why I think we had that success with the Niner D, and that's their offense. And that's why it's a little bit more of a struggle now, just because you're not put together naturally from the scheme standpoint to take away that running game. And that's got to be the first thing you do with a Shanahan offense is take the run away, force him to become pass centric. And then you'll have a pathway to beating him, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate that donation, man. And also very, very well said. Upo, thank you for the $20 donation. I do appreciate all this, like your third donation tonight, Upo, and I dig that about you, man. Thank you for that. Pete Carroll's useless presser. He was battling. He knows what's at stake. He's in it right now. He's fighting out there. He understands things. He's getting after it. East Coast media would never let him get away with this.
Yeah, it is very, very fair to point out that Pete has gotten away with a lot of stuff here that would not have flown in most places.
What do you make of it? Is it a culture thing here in Seattle when it comes to our reporters that they feel like maybe they're being disrespectful if they ask a tough question? Is that what it is? Like, or is it that like they think they're going to get kicked out?
It's got to be. I feel like it's the latter, but it's really hard to know. And it's not just the reporters, though. It's also the fact that we're in this kind of weird ownership situation, right? Yeah. Because I really think a normal owner looks at the Jamal Adams trade alone and decides, okay, we need to get rid of everybody involved here. I really do. I'm not sure, but I think on a lot of teams that would not have somebody would have fallen on the axe for that.
Yes. Well, I think at the very least with Paul Allen, if he was still alive, for instance, he would have removed the defensive powers from Coach Carroll. He would have taken the vice president. She said, you're going to be a head coach. That's what you're going to do. You're going to bring in a defensive coordinator and you're going to let him defensive coordinate. And if Carroll wasn't accepting that, then he probably would have moved on at that point. I don't think he would have sat here and watched this defense do what it's done for years on end with no change and just been like, well, it's okay. They'll turn it around next week. That wasn't Allen's style. That wasn't Allen's way. But yeah, Coach Carroll doesn't give you much when it comes to press conferences, Upo. And he certainly really doesn't give you a lot of insight into the fact of, we see this is wrong here, we're going to go fix it there. It always comes back to, we got to teach it better. Well, we told them, or my favorite, I don't know, I've tried everything. That was my favorite one from a couple of years ago. We've tried everything. We don't know. The answers don't seem to be there. And I think the sad part from my perspective on this is the answers don't seem to be there, not because you can't go find the answers, but because you're so married to your base philosophy that you do not want to leave it. Even when there's so many signs telling you got to leave some of this base schematic philosophy that you are still hard driving towards. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair way to put it, Brendan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just can't believe that he's okay with watching the defense play this badly this often. That's the thing. Like, even if you love your philosophy, you would think that seeing it be this inept this many times for really on and off for 5 straight seasons, 6 straight seasons, something like that, you would eventually say, I'm not okay with how bad this is.
Yeah.
That's the part I cannot figure out.
That's the part where I can't figure out either, but I do come to the answer of just saying, pride's a mofo. And like, he has so much pride in this defense, and he's got so much of that thing. I mean, this is a little bit of a, not to throw shade at Russ, but it's a little thing with Russ too, where it's like the power of positivity, the power of always staying like, we're just a play away from getting this right. We're just a play away from it's a good thing to have, and it works in your benefit. But there's also comes a place where you're pushing that positivity to a place where it's unwarranted, and you need to be looking at the reality of the situation, not trying to sort of utilize the secret in order to manufacture and manifest your reality into something. I wonder if there's a little bit of that at play here, where it's like, well, just through being so mentally tough and strong by the power of positivity, we'll get there on it, because there's no proof of going back and changing stuff. And even when he does do changing stuff, like going to the Vic Fangio cover 2 shell, he won't make that full transition to it. They call it hybridized, but really what it is it's just holding on to the old for dear life. That's really what it is. Yeah, you changed up the front alignment, but you've not really changed up anything else about the way this defense plays. So what was the point of changing at that point, in my opinion? Like, why even make the change if you don't want to make the change? And then for me, that it comes back to, well, it starts to look a little bit of like a more of a PR thing ish. Well, it looks like he's doing something, you know?
Yeah.
Rearranging them deck chairs, man. Rearranging them deck chairs on that Titanic.
I had to change something, or maybe I would have gotten fired. I
Right.
had to do this, or I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe in a few weeks this all just seemed like a bad dream.
You
Maybe,
put it,
but
you bring up a good point. That is a possibility here. I mean, it is one game. Sorry, I interrupted you on that. Go ahead.
yeah, I can't say anything more than that. It's possible that a few weeks from now everything's okay, but even if in a few weeks everything is okay, everything won't be okay, because who knows when what we saw out there on Sunday is coming back. It could come back with the fact that we've seen it once. Now we know it exists, that the team can play that poorly. You never know when it's going to come back.
Yeah, you don't. And if this team wants to consider itself a contender, it's hard to feel that way when you look across the teams across the league. And I don't think that the Niners are going to put a game up like that this year. I don't know that the Eagles are going to go put a game up like that this year. That's the part that gets me frustrated and disconcerted about this season and having hope in this season is like, and like you say, it's more than just this. It's going to be there in the rearview mirror for quite a long time, even beyond this week coming up. Doesn't mean the team can't get around this. Doesn't mean that the light can't turn on for him, Brendan. But it does mean that this was a highly disconcerting loss, one of the more embarrassing losses we've seen of the Coach Carroll era here. And that's got to be made more noteworthy than just let's paint over it. Just paint over the stain and it'll go away. Can't do that. It's not going to go away because it'll come back bubbling up beneath the surface if we don't pay attention to it and, more importantly, take steps to actually try to eradicate it, fix it. See if this defense is going to do it. See if Coach Carroll is going to do it, Brendan. But that's the key at this point. Upo, thank you for all those donations, man. I do appreciate it. And I would love to see, if this does start to go a little bit tough, the media start to get a little bit more harder on things. I understand it's their job and they don't want to get kicked out of the place, but it's your job as a media member to ask the tough questions. It shouldn't be me and Brendan here on YouTube as the guys bringing these kind of subjects up. And I listen to every single press conference of Coach Carroll, and Brendan, they don't even approach. They don't come in the vicinity. They don't come within the galaxy of trying to ever ask one single hard question. And it is frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, after that game, he should have just done the Jim Mora. I mean, what was the one after, what happened out there is that we stunk. We couldn't get a first down. Every time they got the ball in the second half, they got points. And I think the quote from Mora was, "I'm completely embarrassed and completely ashamed." It was the rawest post-game press conference I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And ever since Jim Mora retired, you haven't really been seeing that. Like that's gone extinct, man.
It really has. And I do think it's at the back of that whole power of positivity stuff is where why you haven't at times. And I get the benefit of it, but every benefit's got its negative. Every plus has got its minus. Every cause has got its effect. And just because something's good on the side doesn't mean there's not a downside to it if you're not paying attention to it as well. And I wonder if there's a little lack of paying attention to that downside when it comes to it, especially, Brendan, on not fixing and correcting things that have been long-standing issues. If you're thinking of everything's positive, you're always thinking the next play away is going to solve everything and fix everything. You're not actually going to give the gravity of the problems what they need to be given. And that's what this feels like a little bit for why we've landed here at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Nate Smeltzer, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, this team feels like the definition of insanity. One wonderfully put by Mr. Nate here as he helps us start to kind of wrap this thing up here a little bit. This is, I think, Nate, that's actually the most perfect comment for us to wrap this up on, because this is what's at the heart of the frustrations for me and Brendan. And let me reiterate, and Brendan, I'll let you have your side on it here. I will always give room for new mistakes. I'll always give room for this came up and we didn't expect it. How are we supposed to kind of know when you take all these steps and then this thing happened? You lose 2 tackles and you have 2 backups that aren't good. I'm not knocking the coaching staff for them. Well, you should have had 2 proper good backup tackles to then take over for. No, that's hard. Like I said, no team is going to be prepared in that way. Where I have an issue, and I'm not going to speak for Brendan, let's see if he feels the same way, but where I have the issue is when I can look back to 2019, 20, and 21, when I can look back the last 7, 8 years, and I can see their trends and things that you do that you don't fix, that you don't change, and they continue to be the same problems, the same story told over and over again. Why the team's unwilling to do it, I don't know. But that is that whole way and it's that whole quote that's subscribed to Einstein. We've talked about before on the channel. It's been mentioned. I don't even think it's real, but it doesn't mean it's not true. It is true though. Which is
I actually don't even really think it's true. I don't think that's a very good way of summing up. That's more like optimism to me, like doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That's like blind optimism. I don't think it's insanity, but regardless, either way,
it's not sane. How about that? Maybe it's not insanity, but it's not sanity. It's not smart and it's not intelligent because it's the old, it's like you're just counting on the broken rock. The broken clock's right twice a day and you're counting on it being that time of day when you're happen to play an NFL season. And if it is something that you've done over and over again, that's failed over and over again for the very same reasons, it is kind of insane at that point to expect that it's going to suddenly change on a dime. That's where the insanity part of it comes in. Why is it going to suddenly change on a dime? I don't know. I just feel that way. I emotionally have a feeling that it's going to be that way. You're not basing it on anything? No, I just emotionally feel it'll change suddenly because they're not changing anything schematically. They're not moving guys in different positions. It's the same old coverages, the same old defenses in that part on the back end. So it is literally to say, I mean, they're telling you through their actions through multiple years over, we're going to keep trying the same thing. And eventually that broken clock's going to be right. Eventually going to be 3:12. And then we'll just wait another 12 hours until it's 3:12. I feel a little bit like that is in play here a bit. And
yeah, the frustrating thing is it felt like we were getting away from some of that. We changed our drafting philosophy. I think our last 2 drafts were really good. I think we did a lot of things the right way last off season, deciding, okay, we're going to finally move off of some of these sacred cows of the Seahawks with guys like Wagner and Wilson. Just deciding we're going to do things a little bit differently. Even this off season, we saw things like restructuring contracts to create enough cap space to bring in players. Like we did see some new stuff, but then you see that in that game against that team, and it kind of destroys all the confidence that you were building up that things were going to be different because, well, what good is any of that stuff if you're just going to go out there in your soft zones again?
And my definition, the insanity part for me is just the defense. You're right. And this is why the team's had our support last year. And there's been times we've talked highly supportive of the team, and we are supportive of the team because they have changed their ways on certain stuff and they have smartened up in certain aspects of things. Hell, they changed the offense. That's another place. You modernized your offense. You went from a late 1980s offense to a modernized offense, and you've let this guy cook, and you've gotten the benefits of it. It's only for me, Brendan, just in regards to that defense, where that's the place where you continue to try the same thing. These other places you're showing creativity. These other places you're showing a willingness to change. It's this one spot where you're just digging your heels in, and it's, like a kid that you're just trying to just eat it. No, no. And you can't get him to do it. And it doesn't make any sense why, but I guess we just got to keep grabbing the spoon and shoving it in Coach Carroll's face.
Yeah. What I will say is if it's not going to change right now, if he's just going to keep going to it, then I would ask all opposing teams, keep running the Seahawks beaters. Because it's just going to happen every single game. We're just going to have to get drilled in every single game, I guess, for it to change. It's not enough for it to happen 6 or 7 times a year. It needs to happen 17. So Other teams, please take note on what the Rams did. And if we're going to give you those plays, take them. And if we change things up, then I guess you're going to be playing right into the teeth of the defense. So I'm happy about that too.
Amen. And let us end this with this a little bit too, Brendan. And this is a support thing of Carroll. And again, if you disagree, please say you disagree on this, but there's a support thing of Carroll here with this. He's a great motivator of men. He understands mostly how to get a team, usually most NFL Sundays, to play at a high level and play hard. And he's able to obviously get the most out of young players. There's a lot that Coach Carroll brings to bear. The thing that I don't want to see from Coach Carroll is that this negative part that he has to his coaching side of things that has grown over time, and it's gotten darker and darker and darker, that he allows that thing to be the thing that deep sixes him, that he allows that to be the final chapter of his coaching career to be written. is that he wouldn't let go, is that he held on to the old, like so many other coaches before him who didn't change their ways. And there's room there for him to take advantage of this right now. There's room there for him to write his own final chapter. But he's got to make the tangible decision here to go a different way than the route that he's been going so succinctly for so many years now in regards to the defense. This will be what determines his tale, as at least that final chapter, Brendan, in my opinion. And it will be interesting to see how it goes. But you're right. We're not going to see change unless this thing just got decimated this year. If they're middle of the road or some games are bad, some games are good, they're going to hold on to the old ways throughout because that's what he wants to do, regardless of what he sees from the results.
Mm-hmm.
Brendan, I appreciate you as always for hanging in here for well over 2.5 hours tonight. Folks, if you haven't already, please do go over to Seahawks Brendan Nelson's channel and get subbed on up over on his side of things. We do 2 shows a week here. We'll be back on Thursday on his side of things at 8:00, just after the Thursday night games ends over there. Do me a favor as well, sub up here if you haven't subbed up here too, and hit that like button, as that does help us out, helps us show up in a variety of other different places.
Wait. There's one more dono.
Oh, we got another dono. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, there are 2 more.
We do have
I don't know if you want to read that last one, though.
Okay. Scarecrow Bar 66. Thank you for the $2 donation. He says, my name is Brandon, and I love Scarecrow Bar 66. I do indeed. I do indeed. If Scarecrow wanted me to kill someone, I just give me a name, says Scarecrow. Just give me the name, Scarecrow. $2 donation. I got you, brother. I got you, man. Thank you so much, Scarecrow, for that double donation, man. Very, very funny.
Just wanted to make sure we got that real quick before we wrapped up here.
No, I appreciate it as well. I want to thank to sponsor the channel that I've got going right now, Brendan, Underdog Fantasy, that's sponsoring the channel for me this year. Use my code NEST on underdogfantasy.com. They'll match you up to $100 on your first deposit. So go over there and do that. I appreciate Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the channel as they do. Brendan, we will be back over on your side Thursday to preview hopefully what is going to be a nice upcoming win here for our Seattle Seahawks. I mean, we can get back to front, get back on the right side of things here this week. It is 1 week. It's a long season. We're going to have to just see how this thing turns and kind of keep monitoring it.
Right. I can't. It's been a while since we've needed one quite like this. Not we need this to make the playoffs or anything like that. We need this just to not want to turn our focus to basketball for the rest of the year.
I was going to say stab my eyes out, but turning to basketball is also acceptable.
That's less violent.
That's less violent. I went dark with it. You went more into the let's find a productive way if we can't do this. So it's good on you on that one, Brendan. But yes, indeed, this is going to be a big game to at the very least give the fans a little bit of a shot of hope after a really tough loss last year. We've got to get back our home field advantage too, by the way. We've actually won 3 more games on the road since I believe 2017 when you remove the COVID year. Then we've won at home.
It doesn't make any sense. We travel more than any other team. It should be I just don't make any sense, does it?
It doesn't. A little bit of it is the spirit's been lost in the stadium. And the particular, I've gone back and forth with people in my chat on this, and I know we've gone long, so I won't belay this, but you have ticket prices going through the roof. It draws in the wine and cheese crowd. The wine and cheese crowd in their highfalutin ways do not want to scream and yell. And you have huge portions of that stadium with people sitting on their hands throughout the whole entire football game. And it's sad to see. But unfortunately, it's a reality of life right now in this modern age and where things are at. And I don't think it's changing anytime soon because, in my opinion, we're kind of seeing a little bit of the death of the 12th man tradition here happening in a slow motion fashion in the nature of this, which is kind of sad to see a bit, at least as far as the impact in the stadium goes, And it's weird. And I had people, Brendan, trying to tell me, well, it's the fact they haven't won well in recent years. They just haven't won really well. So it's like, what do they have? I go, yeah. I was in the Kingdom in the 80s. We weren't good. Everybody screamed. So that doesn't fit. That's not right. And I don't even really buy into just because you happen to have an extra $300 in your pocket, now you don't have an ability to voice and be loud. So I don't know. At some point, it'd be nice to see if we could maybe get that fixed or do something about that.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's an answer though. And it bums me out. I've been in that stadium and almost got in fights trying to get people to scream, Brennan. It's been that bad. We're like, why aren't you guys screaming? Like everybody looking like a zombie.
I guess it's the price of success. This kind of happened to the Warriors, the Golden State Warriors. They used to have, when they were terrible, they had great fans.
Yeah.
But when they became good, they just became another crowd.
Yeah. Maybe we'll reclaim it. Maybe if once the team starts getting hot again, you'll start to feel a little bit more of that energy in the stadium. But it is missing a little bit right now as it kind of stands, just a bit, just a little bit. Brandon, I appreciate you for coming in the house as always and chopping it up with me for well over a couple hours. Thank you for hanging on in there, folks. Again, get subbed up over to Seahawks Brandon Nelson's channel. We will be back over on Thursday on his side of things. We got a couple days. We got our fellow 12s a little low in the road. So let's raise you up a bit. It's one game, folks. It's one game. We turned this loss over. We picked it apart. We said, here's where we got to go better. Here's where it's going bad. Here's where some things are going good. But there's always hope. It is only one game. The team's got time to turn it around. We got cavalry coming in with the Devin Witherspoon and Jamal Adams. Maybe they can inject a little bit of life here into this football team and into that defense. So have some faith. The year's not over yet. This isn't done off of one bad, poor game. There's plenty of time to turn this right back around to front. So keep the faith, my fellow Seahawks fans. Keep your eye on that ball. Know that we're still got a lot of time to make this right. And do not ever, ever, ever forget, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.